Hey listeners, how are you all? Thank you so much for being our awesome members. There's a lot to come more. Sit tight, be comfy, put your headphones, now let's begin. Quote. Let's find the place where sight begins and see the things that we saw when our eyes were bright and wet against the light and hold on. Hold tight, open daylight. We will overcome. Thrice, flags of dawn. The sky was still pouring as Team 10 and their ninja comrades slowly walked through the gates of Konaha carrying the still and cold body of Sarutobi Asuma. Shikamaru was still clutching the pack of cigarettes and lighter that he had taken from his sensei, while Choji was walking next to the ninja carrying Asuma. None of the ninja present knew how they were going to tell Kurenai, and none hoped that they would have to be the ones to speak to her. In midst of the rain as the gate of Konaha closed behind them, Eno held her arms tightly around herself, trying to fend off the cold that had suddenly overcome her. As a medic nin, she now felt the full weight of what it was like to not be able to save a comrade in arms. She unconsciously shivered, trying to keep in her body's warmth to keep the seeping cold of death from clawing at her skin. It was a terrible feeling, her personal doubt at being able to make Asuma proud in the wake of, and after his death. Eno could already feel her rock-like resolve dissolving like salt in the midst of the storm. Her eyes burned from her now depleted tears, and her vision was blurred by the rain that helped to replace the lack of them. Her body felt heavy from the weight of what had transpired that day, and suddenly she was struck with a desperate need. Slowly, she felt the buildings of Konaha tower over and enclose themselves upon her as a sense of claustrophobia set in. Run! The word echoed throughout her mind and body, over and over again until she finally succumbed to her instinct. Shikamaru was too dazed to notice her frantic leave while Choji couldn't go after her, for he had finally come to the decision and felt that he should be the one to tell Kurenai about Asuma's passing. So Eno ran through the streets, from rooftop to rooftop until she found herself at the edge of the stream that snaked its way through Konaha. It was there, in the light and compass of trees, that she collapsed onto her backside and pulled her knees close to her chest, hugging them as a lifeline as she buried her face into her knees. She heaved a loud, yet silent sob as she shook in the cold and unrelenting downpour of rain. She wanted to be alone, away from the sympathy and looks. She couldn't stand how desolate Shikamaru looked, how accepting Choji was in light of his tears, how silent and mourning the other ninja were. Time passed as Eno mourned her sensei, her clothes thoroughly drenched as much as she was to the bone. Slowly throughout her time spent by the stream, she had started to feel tired from the cold and her grief, and slowly let her mind succumb to much-needed sleep. Yet, just as she was about to let go of her consciousness completely, the rain slowly began to stop and dry warmth suddenly surrounded her. Her body jerked into awareness, causing her stiff joints to protest rather loudly as she became aware of her surroundings once more. The sun was lightly shining through the grayed sky, though it still seemed to hold the melancholy of grief. Its warm hand slowly wrapped around her chilled skin, slowly seeping into her core as she stared out into the expanse of sky. It was after a long while that she finally realized that there was more than just the sun warming her. Eno shifted her body, slowly getting her blood to circulate as she slowly put her arms through the sleeves of the black and orange jacket that had been placed around her. She slowly stood up and stretched out her limbs before understanding finally came to her mind. Looking around her, Eno took a deep breath, pulled Naruto's jacket closer around herself, and started walking. Eno pondered the fact that Naruto had found her, placed his jacket around her, and then left her in peace without so much as making the sound of a breath. Had she really been that out of it, that she hadn't sensed the blonde come into her own personal space? She breathed deep, taking in the scent of the freshly fallen rain, and Naruto's own personal scent. She suddenly found herself surprised that his jacket smelled of something that reminded her of fresh morning dew in the midst of something just barely citrus in nature instead of something like musky ramen. Eno smiled slightly as she passed the inquisitive stares of a few villagers who had decided to brave the outdoors and get some last-minute shopping in before dinner. No one approached her though, as they gave her enough room to pass by like a phantom through the streets of Konaha, before coming up to her family's flower shop and entering with a small chime of the bell placed above the door. Her mother was slightly startled by her sudden appearance, and watched as Eno simply nodded in greeting before going up to her room silently to get out of her soaked clothing and take a bath to fully warm and cleanse herself. Eno removed Naruto's jacket, asking her mother if she would please dry it out a bit so that she could wear it by the time she was finished, before picking out a few things and entering her bathroom. When she was finished, Eno dressed herself and then entered her room while toweling her hair a bit to get the extra water and moisture out before blow-drying it. While she did this, her mother silently entered her room and put Naruto's jacket upon her bed and paused for a moment. After a moment's insecurity, her mother spoke. "Eno, are you going to be all right?" Eno paused in her hair drying and looked at her mother for a moment, contemplating before answering, "I don't know." Her mother nodded and smiled softly. "Well, just don't forget that you have friends and family to help you through, all right?" Eno nodded slightly and returned to her current task. Once finished, Eno left her hair down and instead put a clip in her hair to keep her bangs out of her face before going over to her bed and picking up Naruto's jacket. She examined it a moment, contemplating, before putting it once more. She then walked downstairs to where her parents were setting up dinner, her giving her a very slight apologetic smile. Eno smiled slightly even though she was still a bit down, before speaking. Would it be alright if I went to Naruto's for a little while? I'm not sure for how long that I'll be out, but I'll be back later tonight, alright?" Her parents nodded in understanding. Even in their apprehension they knew that Eno didn't need their sympathy and that Naruto would probably be the best person for their daughter to be with for now. All of their lingering personal trepidation and prejudice was shoved aside for their daughter in the wake of her grief, for what demon would bother themselves to try and keep their daughter from a death of a cold if he had no heart, no feelings? The two parents knew that there was no need for the hatred towards the fox child, and fully let theirs go. If the younger children and some of the ninja could respect him, they could as well. They had felt this way for a long time now, but now these feelings reinforced themselves as they watched Eno silently leave with a small chime to follow her exit. Eno, on the other hand, simply made her way towards where Sakura had told her that Naruto lived, ignorant of her parents' acceptance of the village menace. It took her a good 15 minutes on foot to reach the somewhat run-down apartment, and another few to walk up the dingy stairs up towards the floor Naruto stayed. Eno made the note that no one had used the stairs for quite some time since they were in a pretty sorry state, and that it was probably expected that it was a ninja living there alone, as she heard no other residents, civilians in the complex. When Eno finally found herself in front of Naruto's door, she suddenly felt a sense of awkward self-doubt fill her. What if this wasn't Naruto's apartment? What would she say to him if it was? She soon found herself exasperated and sighed heavily before finally knocking on his door loudly. It only took a moment for him to answer the door, yet it felt like ages to Eno as he suddenly swung the door open with his eyes scrunched up together in agitation. "What's with all that loud knocking? All you had to do was knock twice. You probably upset the whole neighborhood with how loud you were." Eno took a step back, startled by his greeting. Well, if anyone could be himself, it was Naruto, even if yelling was not something one usually would do to someone who was grieving. It was after his outburst that Naruto opened his eyes and blinked a few times in recognition. "Eno, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be with that lazy bum or Choji." Eno shrugged off her slight annoyance and looked around herself a moment, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. Would you mind if I came in, Naruto?" Naruto's eyes widened a moment before he seemed to suddenly check himself and moved aside, fully opening his door. Sure. There's not much to look at, so don't get too excited." Eno gave a ghost of a smile before going in and taking a look around her. To her amazement, Eno found that Naruto's apartment carried his scent around as well, along with the fact that it was clean. Clean and orderly did not fit her image of the most hyperactive ninja of Konaha. Yet, Naruto was always good at surprising people. Eno found herself smiling as she looked around his apartment, enjoying the simplicity of it all, despite the signs that Naruto seemed to be updating a few things, such as his wardrobe, at the time. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck as he watched her for a moment before asking, "Would you like some tea, Eno?" She looked to him and nodded htly before moving into his bedroom, and examined the large ink painting that hung over his bed. It wasn't that it was some sort of masterpiece, but somehow, the simplicity of the work caused her to look at it for a while. In the meantime, Naruto prepared the tea and watched her from the corner of his eye, half wondering if she was ever going to return his precious orange jacket to him. At the same time, he found he wouldn't mind if she kept it for some strange reason. Shrugging himself out of his momentary trance, he took out the package of tea he'd received as a welcome home GI. Fort from someone he couldn't remember who, and fixed up 2 cups. "Hey Eno." She turned and looked at Naruto, taking in his black shirt that had an orange spiral design on the back, and his black pants. It was odd to see him with so much black, but at the same time, she decided that even Naruto needed a small break from all that orange. It was that, or he had his regular orange pants in the laundry. She then noticed that he also wasn't wearing his hitayate, leaving his hair to be even more unruly than usual. It amazed her that a simple headband could tame his hair the way it did, yet, without it on, she found him to actually be rather attractive. His eyes seemed a tad less open like a book and a tad more mysterious and serious this way. It was as if he were just barely becoming the phantom of someone she simply couldn't place. Naruto watched Eno check him out after being with Jiraiya for 3 years, and getting hit on by girls who thought he was just so cute. He stopped getting nervous about it and decided to snap her out of it. "Oi, Eno." Earth to Eno. Eno seemed to bolt into coherence and blushed lightly, realizing that one of Naruto's arms was slightly outstretched, trying to hand off to her some tea. She smiled a little in thanks, finally realizing just how thirsty she was. Taking in the scent of the tea, she sipped it quietly, finding that Naruto could make a perfect cup and in just the way she liked it. Her smile grew and she appreciated the warmth that the cup of liquid was lending her still slightly chilled body. Of course, while Eno was enjoying the tea, Naruto decided to check her out. Honestly, it was the return favor for spending time actually ogling him. It was a nifty trick he'd realized when dealing with girls. Honest flattery was everything. Of course, that was also within reason. Telling a random girl she had a nice bust and so forth usually caused injury on the speaker's part, which he'd learned from watching Jiraiya get slapped around all the time. Her figure was decent for having been a ninja, and he snapped to the attention that her hair was down. This fact alone enhanced her looks and caused him to admire her hair color and length, along with the way it shaped her face. Yup, Yamanaka Eno was rather stunning with her hair down. Of course, the fact she was wearing his jacket still somewhat threw him for a bit of a loop, as it didn't detract from her figure too much, and looked just about right without the necessity of perfection. He also noted that she was wearing pants similar to his own to match the black of his jacket. This caused Naruto a moment of oddity, as black and orange were very un-Eno-ish colors to wear. He was amazed she could stand it, really. Of course, this made him smile a little as he finished his tea and set his cup in the sink to wash later. "So, Eno, why are you here?" To be truthful, Naruto didn't think Eno would immediately come to return his jacket, since he figured she'd be too dazed from Asuma-sensei's death. He shuddered, thinking back to when the old man had died, and felt a bit of grief seep in. Eno watched him for a moment before replying, "I was wondering what you were doing near the bridge." Naruto paused before pulling up a chair and sitting on it. He motioned for Eno to sit, so she did, on his bed. It wasn't like there was a large space between them since Naruto's apartment was insanely small, which gave her a greater understanding of probably why he loved to run around so much. Being on his bed also told Eno that he must have just recently replaced the mattress, since it had a feeling of new and not used. Eno watched Naruto squirm a little bit before he finally answered her. "Well, I was nearby when I saw you suddenly run off from your comrades and, well, Choji not iced me when you guys returned and kind of signaled for me to follow you when you ran and well, I was there the whole time you were in Eno's face turned from listening to agitated as he went on. "You mean you were there when I was?" Naruto stood abruptly, flailing his arms a bit. "Don't assume I was stalking you or something. Honest, I was just watching you to make sure you didn't do anything stupid, or well, passed out in the rain. You could have gotten pneumonia or something, with how long you were in that rain." Eno huffed and pouted for a moment, deciding to give Naruto the benefit of the doubt. "So, if that's the case, why didn't you come out and talk to me or something?" Naruto blinked a moment, tilting his head to the side questioningly. Would you have wanted me to talk to you? Eno stared at him a moment. No. Naruto nodded, leaning back in his chair. Exactly. I could tell you didn't want anyone to bother you, so I stayed hidden until I realized you were falling asleep. After I left, I went and told your mother not to worry about you, and that you'd probably be home within the hour. Eno looked at him skeptically before deciding to ask, how will someone like you be able to tell that I needed time alone too? Myself. Naruto blinked at her, a flash of hurt going through his eyes for just barely a moment, causing Eno to wonder if she'd seen it at all as he shifted in his chair and turned his head away from her. He propped his chin on a propped hand as his gaze dropped downwards. I need time to myself too, Eno. Even if I hate being alone. She blinked, suddenly feeling a bit guilty, as if she had assumed that Naruto never had his feelings hurt. That's not what I meant to say. Naruto smiled. I know. Eno watched him for a longer moment, the silence causing him to look at her. After a moment, his stare turned slightly curious. What? Eno tilted her head slightly to the side. For some reason you remind me of someone, yet, I can't even think of who it could be. Naruto rose an eyebrow. Okay. Eno paused a moment. What's with the scars on your cheeks? Naruto jerked slightly, startled as if he'd been burned. What about them? Eno shook her head. Nothing. Never mind. I shouldn't have said anything, but anyway, I'm glad to know I wasn't alone, even though I hadn't known you were there at the time. If I'd been truly alone and someone had come to attack me, it would have been the end for me, nay. Naruto shifted. Probably. Eno nodded to herself, placing her empty teacup on the floor beside her feet and got up, stretching herself out. Thanks. Naruto. Maybe we should hang out more often, even if you are still a genin. With that she gave him an honest smile, opened the door, and left him with a small click of his door shutting behind her. Naruto blinked a few times while he stared at his door dumbly. What was all that just now? Suddenly, realization struck as he straightened out and stood. Hey. She's still got my jacket. Rain 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 on my mind. I've got a secret life, wipe it away. Nothing can make me dry, fight all the while. Fight till I think I'm free. Fear reigns so we never see beautiful secret lives. Copeland. Choose the one who loves you more. Naruto laid awake throughout the night before Asuma's funeral contemplating, and for some reason, found it in himself to begin worrying. Asuma had been a wind user. Yet the guy he faced, from the information he'd gathered about the Akatsuki member, was worrisome. Someone who seemingly couldn't die. He knew they were a group of obsessed psychos, but damn. One can only go so far before hitting a wall of speculation on that accord. Whoever'd heard of an ability to never die? Well, that probably explained why Orochimaru, that bastard, had joined Akatsuki. Naruto sighed heavily and closed his eyes for a short while before he turned over in and out of bed, deciding that if he honestly couldn't sleep that he'd just get ready for the funeral now and take a walk. His mind was too filled with questions, and at the rate that he was going, he'd never get the answers. Naruto might not have been academically intelligent, but he was smart. It was just that people enjoyed ignoring that fact about him. Of course, it was mostly his fault, gallivanting around in orange the way he did and pulling pranks, especially his sexy no jutsu. Oh well, at least he'd gained a little teenage angst, and used black instead of blue. See, he was learning. Black was a ninja color, a cliché one, but a ninja color nonetheless. Deciding had he really needed to get started for the upcoming day, Naruto concentrated on the usual everyday essentials. He was hygienic. One simply cannot ignore bad stenches with the slowly, or, rather, rapidly growing sense of smell he was developing, and once finished, made his merry way outside. In the meantime, Eno was preparing herself for the day ahead. She was sort of upset with Shikamaru for picking Asuma-sensei's bad habit of habitual smoking, but after a very loud screaming match, she conceded to the thought behind it and left it alone. She knew tomorrow would be when they'd head out, and she was feeling both excited and apprehensive. Yet, she felt it'd be all right. Sighing, Eno stretched and got up, deciding that now would be as good a time as any to get ready for Asuma-sensei's funeral. So, after about 15 minutes, Eno found herself waltzing the silent streets of Konaha in the early morning. Eno breathed deeply, taking in the scent of the start of morning dew in the mid-saint of a rainy season and looked at the still dim sky. She smiled, enjoying the view while heaven knew she didn't look up at the sky for leisure too much. Naruto sighed in slight frustration. As he found just how boring early morning could be. Heck, he lived on the worst side of town, yet not a single soul was awake. How pathetic was that? Other than a few random ninja running around, things were silent. Naruto pondered if even the crickets were asleep. It was then when he heard the sound of someone walking, and noticed a morning cafe with its lights on, casting a soft warm glow onto the still dark street. Raising a curious eyebrow, he decided to check the place out. At the same time, Eno noticed Naruto on the very same street as her, and decided to go talk with him. She did street. I'll have one of his precious jackets at home. Once she was within about 7 feet of him, she paused and looked the young teen over, sizing him up as he read the menu of the establishment they stood in front of. It was then that she came to realize how the cafe's light was hitting his face, and the shadows that were produced were rather irregular. And this came from the girl who had a teammate who could manipulate his shadow. Bridging the space between them, Eno made her presence more well known. "Hey there Naruto." Slightly startled, Naruto turned to her. "Eno. What are you doing up at this hour?" Eno smiled slightly, noting how Naruto was already dressed in his funeral attire, just like she was. "Well, I was awake and decided to take a nice walk." Looking at the cafe, she thought a moment before asking, "You ever been here Naruto?" The aforementioned boy shook his head. "No, not really." "Is it even open now?" Eno smiled. "Well sure. Wanna grab a light breakfast with me here, then? Since you're so curious and all." Naruto smiled a little abashedly and apprehensively. "Well, alright. So long as they aren't avid haters." Eno smiled at his shyness, and took his hand, pulling him in. Once inside, Naruto took in the wonderful aroma of coffee, pastry, and something he could only call warm. He also took note of the cocoa and grayish-purple walls with tables and chairs that made the place feel like home and comfy to him. Eno then dragged the boy over to an entrance side table and turned back towards the kitchen. "Ran-san. You have 2 customers who'd like a vanilla latte each, K." After a small commotion, a young woman with chocolate brown hair that was pulled up in a simple ponytail, with blue eyes and wearing a nice purple button-up with jeans combo came out and smiled at the two. "Sure thing. I'll even bring out some of those pastries you like so much, Eno-sama." Nodding, Eno turned to Naruto, who seemed slightly surprised and perhaps a little put out. "What's wrong with you?" He blushed, rubbing the back of his head slightly embarrassed. Oh nothing, I was just a little surprised. I've never seen Ran-san around before." Eno smiled. "Well of course not. Ran came into Konaha from a bordering village to set up this coffee shop about a year and a half ago. I don't know if you like coffee or anything, but the lattes here are awesome." Naruto smiled and nodded, never really having had a latte before, and simply took her word for it. "Hey, so how are you doing?" Eno blinked at the sudden switch in conversation, and shrugged a little. "I'm alright. I mean, I'm still upset, but I have to keep going forward to make Asuma-sensei proud." Naruto smiled. "Well, that's good to know. You did always seem to be rather strong." Eno gave him a big genuine smile. "Think so? I didn't think of you as one to study one's character, Naruto. With how Sakura obsessed you seemed to be when we were younger." He shrugged. "Maybe not initially, but I do have an understanding of people." Eno nodded, mulling that over. It was shortly after that Ran returned with a plate of pastries and their lattes. "So, who's the guy Eno?" "Sama." Eno shifted slightly at En's absurd look of girly mischievousness. "This is Naruto. He's a part of the infamous Rookie 9, and the only one who's still a genin." Naruto was about to make a comment when Eno raised a hand and silenced him, continuing, "Of course. He couldn't help it since he's been away the past couple of years." Ran nodded and smiled pleasantly at Naruto and stuck her hand out in a handshake. "Well, I'm Mori Ran, owner of this little cafe shop." Naruto smiled and masked his nervousness and shook her hand. "And I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and someday I'm going to be Hokage." "Believe it." Biwahahaha. Ran laughed lightly. "Well, if I can fulfill my dream, I hope you can fulfill yours Naruto-sama." Naruto blinked and smiled. Thanks, you're honestly probably the first person to honestly take my dream seriously. Ran raised an eyebrow. Why's that? Naruto smiled cheekily and winked. That's an ultra super class secret. Ran laughed lightly. I see. Well, I better get back to making some more pastries for the day. You two enjoy yourselves now. Once Ran was back in the kitchen, Eno looked to Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Would this have something to do with those weird marks on your cheeks? Of course, as fate would have it. Eno asked this just as Naruto was testing out his latte, and thus, proceeded in the atypical comical choking. Once his lungs were cleared of hot nice drink, he scratched the side of his head and tried thinking of a way out of this one. Well, what do you mean? Eno rolled her eyes, trying to give him the benefit of intelligence. I mean exactly what I said. Why do you have those marks on your cheeks? I know it's probably a little bit much of me to ask you, but... Naruto waved a hand slightly. No, it's alright. I'm actually surprised no one's ever really asked me that by now. Especially Kiba, with that big yap of his. As for my marks, well, they've just always been there. I'm not really sure why that had to be the side effect of my, blood limit, but it's because of that I have these marks. Naruto was totally sweating bullets now. Eno watched him closely the whole time, knowing he was both lying and telling the honest truth at the same time. Is it really that big of a secret? That you can't fully explain it? Naruto immediately became downcast and stared blankly at the table. Eno, there's a reason why I was a bit surprised that Ran-sama was friendly with me. Eno's eyes widened a bit, thinking back on what she could remember of Naruto. The only thing she could remember was feelings of annoyance, hate, and him being alone. Completely, absolutely alone. Naruto. He shook his head and smiled a little bitterly. I'm a lot like Gaara, Eno. He once said that he was like a memory that people only desperately wished to forget. I'm the same as him. I'm simply something that everyone wants to forget, and thus, they've never really treated me well. Eno watched him as he played with the pastry he had almost started eating before questioned and looked down at the table. I'm sorry. I guess I shouldn't have pressed. Naruto smiled. It's alright. I mean, you were on my squad in that mission when we went to that weird village with the fish girl and... Eno jumped slightly. Oh. That one with Anko-sensei. Yeah. I remember that a little. She blushed a little at her outburst. Naruto nodded. Yeah, well, do you remember sensing some weird creepy chakra? A lot like the kind that I used against Neji in the Chunin exams. Eno thought for a moment and nodded. Yes. I remember that rather. Well, actually. It's because of that chakra. Eno looked at Naruto silent and somewhat startled, feeling a sense of finality in their conversation. They finished their early breakfast in a both awkward and comfortable silence and departed shortly thereafter. It was then that Naruto's nagging sense of worry came back, and he realized that he was worried for Eno. And he hadn't even the slightest idea why. And there you have it. A nice second shot. I'm going to try and make the one-shots fit together, if I do anything more with this. Please, review and tell me how you liked it. Also, thanks for the reviews for the previous chapter. 30 on a possible only a one-shot is like. Awesome. I'm also on a couple of C2s. Thanks. With my other name. I like, barely got 5 reviews per chapter, so, please, don't stop supporting me through reviews now. I need words to motivate me, even if it's, great chapter, story. I appreciate you all. Advertisement. I'm going to throw this out. Check out Copeland album, In Motion. Great stuff. If anything, check out lyrics. Also, if you've ever seen Yu-Gi-Oh!, you must see Yu-Gi-Oh!, the abridged by Little Karibo on YouTube. Awesome, hilarious, and nothing like the usual parodies people, especially guys, put out. Oh, and look out for the imposters. Eno stared at herself in the mirror, introspecting on her life and all that she had accomplished. Sasuke's leaving gave her a new form of strength and fire as a ninja. Watching Sakura be so torn up about a guy and down herself as a ninja in her accomplishments was in a way, very distressing. They weren't the best of friends they had been before, but that still didn't mean Eno didn't know of how strong the pink-haired girl had become. Yet, looking back, Eno found she really didn't like the way Sakura pulled Naruto around begging him for this or that. It wasn't until he had gone off to train that Sakura had gotten completely serious about being a ninja. Did she seriously have to lose 2 of her teammates to realize how important she was in the whole scheme of things? Eno sighed as she tied her hair up for the day and promptly left the house, troubled by the fleeting past ghosts that clung to her. Walking through the town slowly, she made her way to the outskirts where she could sense Naruto training. It was rather obvious, what with the copious amounts of chakra he was using, that and the new waterfall and cliffside that had appeared. Along her way she picked up enough food for 4 ninjas and continued walking, humming softly to herself. As she made her way she greeted random villagers and pondered to herself, in a fleeting moment, if any of them had hurt Naruto on purpose while they were growing up. She paused for a moment, startled at her thoughts. Why would she think that? She knew Naruto had been treated pretty badly, and while she didn't have a full understanding of just how far it had gone, it couldn't have been that horrible, could it? Could a place as welcoming as Konaha really be so cruel to one of its own? She slumped in a small internal form of defeat at the edge of the training grounds. How much did she know about Naruto? How many times had he surprised her in just one conversation? Sure, he'd been horribly obnoxious as a 12-year-old, but now he was more mature. Not completely an adult, but not a child. Graceful, and yet still awkward in his step. But there had always been something off, hadn't there? Something that was so incredibly wrong and unsafe about him, even though he was probably where one could feel safest. Eno jolted and shook herself. No, calm down, just top this train of thinking and enjoy the nice day. Besides, it should be interesting to observe Naruto's secret training. With that in mind, she jumped into a tree and settled herself to observe. In the end, Eno wasn't sure if it was a wasted effort, or if what insanely ingenious. 1,000 Narutos held leaves in their hands. At first, Eno was incredibly confused until she realized he was listing through the pieces of greenery with his chakra. Why in the world is he training through that method? What good do a bunch of bunshin do him? Soon, she got her answer. Suddenly, one out of the hundreds made a shout and excitement happened for a moment before all of them disappeared at once, leaving only one Naruto behind. After a few words with Kakashi and Yamato, Naruto passed out from what seemed to be exhaustion. Eno blinked and got out from the tree she had perched in and went down to speak with Naruto's 2 sensei. Well, if isn't Eno, what a surprise. She looked to the masked Junin who had spoken to her nonchalantly. He'd probably spotted her long ago. I was interested in this super special training for Naruto that I've been hearing about. Kakashi nodded to himself as Yamato got up and dusted himself. It's nothing particularly interesting to look at, despite the vast amount of effort going into it. What are you training him in exactly? I mean, I can tell it's nothing to do with chakra, but I'm a little lost. Kakashi put away his Ika with much personal regret and looked at her blankly. We're training him how to use his elemental chakra. Eno quirked an eyebrow. Really? Which one? Wind. He's a wind user. Eno paused for a moment, her eyes widening a little. He has the same element as Asuma sensei. Isn't that difficult? Kakashi nodded. Of course. Especially since we're trying to combine it with an even more difficult attack. I won't give you any more details than that, but it is rather difficult, impossible even. Yamato nodded. Of course. Since we're talking about Naruto, Kakashi smiled. It's quite possible. Eno was rather surprised by their answer and wondered what exactly she was missing from the big picture here. So why all the bunshin? Naruto has always used kage bunshin, which is a forbidden technique used for information gathering. Naruto learned it, and with each bunshin he gains its knowledge and skill. Thus, using say, 1,000 bunshin, he gains each clone's knowledge and experience. Eno pondered this for a moment before nodding slowly. I understand. Kakashi smirked. Good. Now if you'd like to hand over some of those rice balls, I'd be quite happy to take a few off your hands. Eno rolled her eyes and gave him and Yamato a box. Greedy old perv. Chapter 3 has been redone. Not a whole lot of Naru-Eno interaction. But I'm playing catch up and rethink for this story. Now on to remaking Chapter 4. Wu dies. Change August 23, 08. I'm going to put the original Chapter 3 here though IW Old like to cut out a Naruto Eno childhood meeting out of it since I didn't like it in retrospect. I hope that it still feels like the moment I wanted from this chapter was accomplished, but I really can't tell. The reason I'm putting the original back up is that, while reviewing reviews, I felt readers did enjoy the chapter, and I don't know if this chapter remake lowered the quality in comparison to the original. Either way, it's pretty much the same moment, just a different kind of way going about it. So in short, this chapter has two possibilities. My original below, and the new version above. In copying it over, I lost some italics, etc. Also, Eno's mother's name is now Yuna. I had originally decided on Adelaide. And then people flipped out because it wasn't Japanese. Sigh. Eno sighed longingly as she fully stretched out while laying on her bed. It had been a few days since Asuma's passing, and even though Team 10 had very desperately wanted to go out after Akatsuki, the fact that they still had to have a Junin-sensei accompany them had kept them back from leaving at their desired timeframe. So here she was, Yamanaka Eno, stuck training, and waiting around until a Junin-sensei was available. Great. The feeling that it would take a while burned at her, frustrating her and her teammates, even though the other two were far better at concealing such feelings than she was. With the thought of training some more in mind, Eno made herself get up and head out to the training grounds. Once she reached her destination, Eno began warming up before working on her taijutsu first. Taijutsu, while not her best skill, was growing due to the small arsenal Tsunade was supplying her with. She and Sakura were similar in the area of strength to chakra, though Eno was still growing in her training, and was behind the pink-haired girl in this area due to the fact that she didn't have some of Sakura's natural talent, nor did she delve into the attack aspect of Medijutsu as deeply as Sakura. It was during her taijutsu practice that she remembered that Naruto was training somewhere with Kakashi-sensei and some other sensei on the outskirts of Konaha's training grounds. With this thought in mind, Eno decided that she'd had enough of her training and headed back to her home to freshen up. Once done, Eno picked up Naruto's jacket, put it on, and headed out again to find which training ground Naruto was actually training in. It took Eno until mid-afternoon to locate the Naruto trio, and Eno immediately decided to take a break and watch what was going on. To be honest, seeing a massive amount of Naruto clones try and cut a leaf with wind chakra, which chilled Eno a bit with the fact he was a wind type like Asuma-sensei, was both an amusing and awing experience. While watching, Eno continuously noticed how Yamato Taiko, perhaps was his name, was seated, and how repeatedly Naruto would have to dispel clones so that whatever was going on with him and his chakra would stop. Well, the whole thing in general was interesting and confusing for her as an outsider. It was after a while that Eno decided to get comfortable to watch Naruto train, while she didn't feel like doing much of anything, and even though she knew she should probably be doing something else, she wanted to watch Naruto train. He had only been back for a short while, and she did really want to see how he could grow as a ninja. It was really sort of captivating how Naruto could completely come out from a total lose-lose situation and win it. Observation would give the chance to see Naruto without him having to keep all of his pretenses up. His guard was down around these people in regards to his true self, and she needed to know something more, if not for anything than to be able to satiate her curiosity. The sky was overcast with rain pouring as she sat, curled in on herself with a few scrapes on her right arm and hands as she waited for her father to come for her. Her mother had been talking to some friends in the market when she had stated she wanted to go to the park, and her mother relented, saying her father would fetch her later. It had been fun for the first couple of hours, playing with the other kids. That was, until it rained. Eno sighed as she shivered from the wind that would sometimes pick up, making the play set she was sitting under for shelter rather useless. She knew it was getting late, especially with how hungry she was getting, but she just couldn't remember how to get home from here. Tears built up as tiredness, the chill, and frustration started to get to her. Eno began wishing she hadn't left her mother's side, even if it had been really boring, just standing there. She had started to fall asleep when she heard the scuffling that happens when one walks on the pebbles that covered the expanse of the play and swing set area of the park, which caused her to wake up and look towards the source of the sound. It was a boy with an old, somewhat worn grayish vest, Underneath it was a medium yellow shirt with an orange spiral, and brown shorts. He held a broken-down umbrella, that though an adult couldn't really use it anymore. A child their age could fit under what was still usable of it easily, perhaps even two. Still, even though his clothes weren't in the best of shape, it was his eyes that made Eno somewhat frightened of him. While the scars that marred his cheeks didn't really bother her, his eyes always somewhat frightened her. He was a kid her age, yet his azure eyes were so hollow and angry it just scared her in a way that she wished it hadn't. It was with those blank, hollow eyes that he stared at her with. He seemed a little bored perhaps, the rain and wind not really bothering him despite his small body. She noticed he was trying to think of something to say, when he finally just walked over to her and grabbed her ice-cold hand and pulled her up and under the cover of his umbrella. She stared at the boy rather surprised as he looked to the ground, deliberating something until he handed her the stem of the umbrella. Eno looked at it a moment before taking it, and found hers. LF a little surprised when he took his beat-up yet dry vest off and put it around her shoulders before taking the umbrella back. She blinked. "What are you?" The blonde shrugged slightly and took her hand in his again. "Are you lost?" Eno paused, and then slowly nodded, ashamedly, "MMHM." The boy nodded, and tugged her hand lightly, keeping her close as he took her with him in a direction she didn't recognize. While confused, Eno didn't press on where the boy was taking her. The main thing that really mattered was getting warm again. She could feel a small scratching at her throat, signaling that she was probably getting sick because of being out in the cold summer rain for so long. She looked at the boy a moment, realizing she knew of him, yet didn't know his name. "Hey." The boy looked at her slightly annoyed. "What?" His reaction annoyed her, but she let it slide. "What's your name?" The boy blinked, somewhat surprised. Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto." Eno pondered a moment, not recognizing the clan name, but shrugged it off and nodded. "I'm Yamanaka Eno." The boy seemed to smile just slightly. "I know who you are. I know who all the kids are." Eno looked at Naruto a little strangely. "You know everyone." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, but no one really likes me." He turned his head away, still holding her hand, signaling to her that he really didn't want to talk anymore. Eno nodded slightly, somewhat sad by this piece of knowledge. After what seemed like forever, Eno started noticing things she could recognize, and before she could really mull it over, she and Naruto were standing in front of her home. The Yamanaka flower shop. He looked at her. "This is where you live, right?" Eno nodded. "Yup. How do you know?" Naruto smiled somewhat mischievously, which was something she hadn't remembered ever having seen from him. "Your last name's Yamanaka, silly. This is the only flower shop with a girl like you that holds that name." Eno blushed. Oh. Naruto seemed about to say something else when the door flung open. "Eno." The two children started. Naruto seemed to not only jump, but also release her hand and flinch back when the distraught mother opened the door. Eno CKLY found herself whisked up into the arms of her mother into the dry doorway of the shop. "Oh Eno, I was so worried. I couldn't figure out where you'd gone, once I found out your father had gone off on a mission with his old team and oh, I'm so glad you're back." Eno struggled a little with the affection, though she also welcomed it. Then, just as suddenly as she was being cuddled, her mother picked up Naruto swiftly, surprising the boy and making him squawk. The boy struggled a bit, before calming down, realizing the elder Yamanaka wasn't going to hurt him or chuck him out like any fair adult would have other than the old man who actually cared about his well-being. Naruto blinked and looked up and Eno's mother confused. "Huh." Yuna smiled just slightly, a little compassion for the boy appearing on her demeanor. "I'm going to reward you for bringing my little Eno-chan home." Naruto opened his eyes, blinking a little as a ghost of a smile appeared on his face. He'd managed to pass out after his last bout of clone dispelling, and it seemed he'd been left alone after that. His training for the day obviously finished. He didn't know why he had dreamt of one of his few good childhood memories. Considering he honestly had completely forgotten about that incident with Eno, but it left him with a nice feeling. It had been a really strange day for him when Eno's mother had taken care of him until the storm was over. Naruto sighed as he pushed himself up into a sitting position before forcing himself up onto his feet. He then went under the waterfall Yamato-sensei had created and took a quick bath. Hey! It was cold water. Before he stretched languidly before looking around himself, suddenly sensing something on the outskirts of the training grounds. Being interested, he tracked the faint chakra signature to its source. A manic grin appeared on Naruto's face as he found a sleeping Eno, sensing some irony in the situation. Or was it coincidence? Whatever it was, Naruto was a little amused, though put off by it. That, and she was wearing his jacket, again. He rolled his eyes before deciding to watch Eno sleep for a few moments. During that time Naruto decided there was only one thing he could do: bring her home where she wouldn't get a horrible crick in her neck. Carefully, Naruto picked Eno up bridal style and made the somewhat long trek back to the Yamanaka flower shop. On the bridge in moonlight. Chapter 4 Remake. I didn't like the original Chapter 4. It never sat well with me, and so finally, on August 13, 08, I'm fixing it and rewriting the whole thing with something different. LOL. Dies, it's another shorty, but that's okay. I'm making up for lost time and whatnot, and hopefully, even with shorter chapters, I'll want to update this more. I hope this chapter and the last flow with the first two alright. Now onwards. Like wind behind the grass in sway, asleep at certain times of day. Don't turn away, looming moon, you'll have your revenge very soon. Don't turn away from what you love, soon you'll be finding it's much too tough. I have thought of sharing all these different feelings from undercovers. May we all turn into the leaves that crack and break apart. And I'm anxious to relieve my mind from desperate thoughts. I hope you remember me always. Secret and whisper, looming moon. Naruto trudged behind all of the others during their return to Konaha. He sighed heavily to himself. Even after all of that training, combining my wind with the Rasengan is still way too dangerous. He clutched his horribly mutilated right arm. Sure, it had been healed some, but it would take his own healing time to fix everything without horribly weakening the arm. Wind was powerful and destructive, yet still something that could be soft and much like a caress. Naruto shook his head. It's no use getting down on myself, I've just gotta train harder and get better with it so I don't hurt myself so bad next time. Eno, who was celebrating with her team on their successful mission of avenging Asuma's death, turned just slightly back to look at the others. Most of the rest of the squads were pleased, but Naruto was hanging back just a little more than he should have. She turned a bit more. Hey Naruto, you alright? Everyone of course turned to look at the whiskered boy, causing a moment of pause and panic. Wah. Oh, I'm totally awesome, why wouldn't I be? He was giving that obnoxious smile while saying this though, and that only bothered Eno more. Huffing, she turned back forward and shrugged, if you say so. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at his fellow blonde while Sakura shrugged to him and turned around to face forward. Eno's personal party had been dampened slightly by her sudden annoyance at his brush-off for her concern. It wasn't that he had literally done anything wrong, but that smile has always pissed me off. He'd been doing such a good job of surprising her lately, and making her proud of his accomplishments. She had, perhaps even started to desire to be his friend and be known as such. Yet she couldn't help her annoyance with that smile, something was just seriously wrong with it. It was more than just an annoying grin. And while it did seem to hold some sort of mischief to it, there was still something horribly lacking. Eno sighed heavily. Never mind. Just enjoy the victory we've had, it was a great accomplishment to take out 2 Akatsuki members. Nodding to herself, she once again joined in celebration. Still, there was that small nagging at the back of her head that she was seriously missing out on something. Naruto turned over in his attempt to sleep. He was annoyed with himself, having been horribly worried for Eno for so long for nothing. Oh sure, he hadn't known she and her members of Team 10 had planned to avenge their sensei and decided to go after the Akatsuki themselves, but still, it had been annoying, and it seemed like it was all for nothing now. No, he couldn't really say his worry was for nothing. It was just, he threw his pillow in frustration and sat up, huffing heavily. I need some air. Stretching and making a quick change into warmer clothing, he did his way outside to the place near the bridge Team 7 had always met up at, and where Eno had run off to that day Asuma died. His way was silent and thought-filled with different things. He observed Again and again the things that were the same and the things that were different since the time before his training. When he reached his destination he realized a shadow no person was already standing on the bridge. He paused for a moment confused as to why anyone else would be here this late until he realized who it was. Eno. The shadow started and turned to him, helping to define feature and color again. Wah. Naruto blinked. So it is you. He walked over and noted she was wearing his jacket to fend off the night chill. He looked a little incredulous for a moment. What are you doing out here so late? He stood beside her and shifted into a similar position as her, relaxed against the side of the bridge. She paused. I was just out here thinking. Sakura would hang out here a lot. After you left, so I came to find this to be a pretty nice place to go to when I needed to think. Naruto nodded as he put weight on the rail and looked into the water. Oh, was Sakura sad a lot? Eno thought a moment, looking at Naruto's reflection in the water and noticing how dark those marks on his cheeks looked once again like at the coffee shop. It's kind of hard to say. Sometimes she was sad about her past failures. Sometimes she was sad that she had failed Tsunade that day during her training, and sometimes she was just sad. Probably grieving for some reason or another. Not to say she was always sad while she was here. Because sometimes she'd celebrate. Still, it was a place she frequented a lot. Naruto nodded just slightly, his eyes lit a bit as his hair shifted in a very small breeze. Eno once again took note of how different he looked without his Hitai. Hey Naruto. What? She stood straight and stretched a moment, enjoying the small drawing of his attention before she turned and started walking. You should wear your hair like that more often. Naruto paused confused. Wah. Eno smirked and turned slightly. Night Naruto. The blonde boy just stood confused a moment. Night Eno. She nodded and disappeared from his sight quickly, satisfied she'd been able to so horribly confound him with such a simple compliment and suggestion. Meanwhile, Naruto sighed heavily as he partially collapsed on the thick arm of the bridge. Women, confusing creatures. Wait a second. Damn it, she still has my jacket. Mrs. Yamanaka observed her daughter gardening out back with a small amount of worry. Now, it wasn't that Eno was acting strange or trying to hurt herself in depression. No, it was that jacket. Yuna was well aware of her daughter's sense of fashion. And wearing Naruto's jacket around the house and sometimes, even when she decided to go out at night, like some sort of security blanket was really starting to bother her. She supposed if it was Eno's way of getting comfort, it was all right. But still, that orange was somewhat obnoxious, and she truly wondered how Eno could stand it. Surely Eno could have clung to something less painful on the eyes than the jacket, right? Sighing softly she walked towards Eno in an almost ninja-like silence. Eno, dear. Eno paused and looked up to her mother. Yes. Yuna thought about her next move for a moment, shifting. Don't you think it's about time you returned that jacket to Naruto-kun? I'm sure the boy misses his jacket terribly, adding thoughtfully in her mind, even if he does have more than one. Eno blinked and looked at the atrocity she allowed herself to indulge in. It's not that bad, and he doesn't mind. With a pause, she half pondered. At least, I don't think he does. Yuna forced a small smile on her face. Well, please do return it to him soon. It's not good to keep people's things for too long. No. Eno nodded. All right. I'll return it to him soon, I promise. Yuna's smile became more prominent and joyful. Good. How about you invite him over for dinner sometime or something? Perhaps. Bring him a lunch someday to maybe get him off of all that ramen he eats. Nay. Eno blinked and looked up to her mother with a bewildered look on her face. What am I, his caretaker? Eno's mother sighed and rolled her eyes. Of course not, but honestly that boy really should be treated better. And I'm sure no girls, not even Sakura, has ever treated that boy to a homemade meal. You could beat her at being especially courteous, you know. The blonde teen just stared at her mom somewhat put out. This conversation was just going in a really strange direction. Sure mom. I'll do that right now, alright. Yuna smiled with a bit of mischief. Please do. And don't forget to put that jacket in the laundry, would you dear? It's covered in dirt and I'd hate for you to return it dirty. It's just not good manners. No. Eno rolled her eyes and wiped the dirt off of her knees. Whatever. I'll take some money on my way out. That's just fine. Now get going. Eno waved as she entered the house. Yeah. Yuna smirked almost foxily as she entered the house. Glad her suggestions worked. Meanwhile, Eno quickly freshened up and changed into more civilian-like clothing. If she was going to cook, she did not want to wear her ninja clothes. She might be pretty good when it came to what she could cook, but she made a huge mess of it when she did. Dressing in a simple purple top similar to her usual ninja gear and a pair of almost black pants. She started on her way out before running into her father. Oh, hello father. Inoichi smiled. What are you up to? Eno shrugged. I'm going out to get some groceries. Her father nodded a moment before thinking of something. Can you do me a favor? Eno blinked and nodded after a moment's thought. Sure. Can you go to the storeroom and get that old red scroll box I keep near the back? There's a few jutsu in there that I want to look over. Eno nodded. All right. With that, she made her way across the Yamanaka property and went into the storehouse. Looking around, she took note of small knick-knacks and old tools from the past. Wandering around for a while, she took a small amount of time to appreciate a piece of antique jewelry, a random intricately engraved throwing star, and an older leather kunai holster until she came upon the item in question. The red scroll box. Eno nodded to herself as she made sure it was the correct one and went to pick it up before she realized there was a small blue box on top of it. Eno paused, picking up the strange new item, and took note that there was dust under where it had laid. Did this fall recently? She looked up and noticed some of the other boxes on the upper rafters had shifted, and others still seemed to be about ready to fall. The blonde huffed to herself. Dad needs to check this place more often. Who knows what else could have fallen and possibly broken. Looking around to make sure there weren't glass or pottery shards littering the floor, she redirected her gaze to the little blue box. For a moment, she wondered if she should leave it alone. But in the end curiosity won out and she slid it into her empty money pouch to look at later. She then picked up the item she came for and left without hardly moving any of the dust within the storeroom. Entering the shop again, she found her father. Got it? Inoichi smiled. Thank you. Eno paused. What's so important about the jutsu in there anyway? Her father shrugged. I was just thinking of teaching you a few more techniques is all. Eno smiled with excitement. Really? Inoichi nodded. There's even a genjutsu here. But I needed to double check and make sure that they aren't too difficult. Eno jumped in excitement. I'm totally prepared for anything, so don't hold back just because I'm your daughter. Got it? Mr. Yamanaka laughed. All right, now get going. You know where the money is. Eno smirked. Sure do. And with a laugh and a twirl she left the shop with enough money to buy groceries for two. Naruto was not having a good day. No, the fact that his sink had overflowed, his front door had broken off the hinges, and that something had gone terribly sour in the fridge, all of those things were nothing compared to the ruckus the little old hag in front of him was making. Time and time again I've told you to stay the hell away from my store, you vile creature. I don't want you to be within even 15 feet of it. I swear, I'll have a restraining order placed on you if you can't bother yourself to be courteous to us normal humans who far more superior. Naruto sighed and rolled his eyes. Does this woman not need to breathe? Damn it, I just wanted to get some new hinges. Single quote. ND another thing. I'll have you know the last time you passed by here I ended up falling. Naruto groaned, his shoulders slumping as the onlookers who had decided to watch the skeptical started wondering whether they should continue their hatred for Naruto, or hate the old lady who would not shut up. It was during this exchange that Eno happened upon Naruto and the crowd that had formed. She glanced around at the villagers and noticed people had started taking bets on how much longer the demon child could stand the old woman patronizing him. Or they took bets on how much longer the old woman could go without taking a single breath. Eno sighed heavily and pushed her way through the crowd, trying to get a better idea of just what Naruto had done to piss her off. Naruto-kun. Quote. Naruto turned to Eno confused for a moment, blinking. Oh, Eno-chan. The old woman clubbed Naruto over the head with her cane for turning away from her. How dare you disrespect me? I'll have you know. Naruto growled as his patience reaching the end of its tether. Old lady. How dare you threaten me? Help, help. The demon child, Eno, by this point, was done. She walked over grabbed Naruto, and stormed away before Naruto or anyone else could do anything. How dare you, you vile vixen. Don't you ever come to my store, you fox slut. Silence. Wind S. Cheered in the streets as Eno turned slowly to the old woman, a look of rage overcoming her before Naruto could even react to what the old woman said. Mrs. Tachikawa, I suggest you watch your words. I don't exactly know what your problem is with Naruto here, but if you dare to think you can get away with calling me some slut, me, a ninja of Konaha, I suggest you pack your bags. Because if Tsunade doesn't get to you first, my father will, and I'm sure you know all about his and his team's exploits during the war. The old woman froze up a bit, suddenly realizing she had just called Eno Yamanaka Tsunade the Godime's second apprentice, a fox slut. Yet, not only that, but Inoichi Yamanaka of the original Ino Shikacho team's daughter, a vile vixen. She immediately started bowing profusely to the two. I apologize. You're welcome anytime. Please forgive me. Eno sniffed and turned while pulling Naruto with her. Whatever. People like you make me positively sick. Naruto watched silently as Eno cooked in his kitchen. Sure, he had fought and fussed over those horrible vegetables she said she would force upon him, but otherwise he felt rather elated at the prospect of a home-cooked meal. Normally he really didn't care. But after the fiasco he'd endured today, well, he'd eat a few veggies in thanks for helping him buy his new door hinges and the necessary chemicals and tools to fix his sink with far more ease than usual. At first, he had tried to help her with cooking but soon found how useless he was and simply conceded to defeat and sat down out of her way. So, what is it you're making again? Sukiyaki. Oh, a moment of pause before Naruto sighed. Why was this so awkward? Hey Naruto. What was going on today with you and Mrs. Tachikawa? He sighed heavily. Nothing. I accidentally breathed in her direction. I forgot that I usually never take that route because of that psycho bitch of a grandma. Eno pondered for a moment, but that doesn't make sense. She's usually a very nice lady, even if she did call me a slut. Naruto thought about how to answer that. You know how most of the village hates me, right? Eno nodded. Yeah, but that's the thing. What exactly did you do? And why do they keep calling you a demon child, and associating you with foxes? I mean, the whisker marks on your face do make you seem a bit fox-like, but not that much. It almost makes you think they believe you're the Kyuubi, which is totally stupid considering the fourth Hokage destroyed it. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine at how on the mark she was. Yeah. You'd think. He laughed nervously as he rubbed the back of his head. Eno quirked an eyebrow at his behavior. What the heck's your problem? Naruto waved her off a bit. Nothing. I just thought of how, interesting your theory was. The blonde girl blinked and shrugged. Whatever Naruto. He sighed as he stared at the few items Eno had left to the side and wasn't cooking to try and calm his nerves. Hey Eno. She pulled out serving dishes for their meal. Naruto tilted his head slightly. What's with that box? Eno blinked. Oh that. I found it in the storeroom today. Naruto nodded and got up to take a closer look at it. You check it out yet? She placed the plates, cups, bowls, and spoons on the table before replying. Nope. I was going to look after dinner though. I see. Naruto nodded to himself thoughtfully. There was something that was bothering him about the box, but before he could think of what it was Eno pulled him to sit down at the table again. Time to eat. Oi, no need to be so rough about it. Eno smirked. Don't be such a wuss Naruto. He rolled his eyes and checked his food over before stuffing the horrid, wretched vegetables in his mouth. He remixed and forced himself to swallow the vile things that should never have had to have been considered so healthy and necessary in one's diet. Eno rolled her eyes at his behavior and smirked a little to herself. He should be thankful, considering I took the time to make sure he had far less vegetables than what was in there originally. Jerk. Single quote. Meanwhile, Naruto forged on in his war and won with surprising ease. He paused. Did you take out some of the vegetables? Yup. I might not know you that well, but I do remember your absolute loathing of vegetables. Oh. Naruto fidgeted in his seat, thinking of what it was that you should say before it came to him. Thanks. Eno paused and looked to him before she smiled nicely. You're welcome. Naruto's eyes widened for a moment. Never Having seen Eno, or most of anyone, give him such a pleasant face, they tasted pretty good. For veggies. Eno's smile broadened. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Naruto. He scrunched his face. No. I'd really rather not. She laughed suddenly. I'm just joking. Oh. They continued eating. Takato. Sorry if Naruto and Eno seemed a little OOC. DX I hope it wasn't. Too bad. If it was I profusely apologize, but I wanted to get a new chapter out like, a new chapter for you all. I've come to find that I wish the last filler arc, Sora, hadn't occurred while Asuma was alive. It's given way for so many possibilities and plenties, yet, at the same time it cramps them. I'm not sure what I'll do to implement anything from that filler arc, but I must say in comparison to pretty much all of Shippuden to that point, the Sora arc was full of win and awesome. If you have any prompts or ideas for this story, please let me know in a review. It would be helpful. I've stated that I would like to deviate away from the manga, especially with how much time has passed since I started this dies. I apologize for taking so long, but writing for me can come and go. And it doesn't help that the email for this account is one I never go to. So, on that end, I hope you all enjoyed the new chapters 3 and 4, and enjoyed this last chapter. Please let me know at improvements I need to make the story better, and please forgive me if I was a little rusty. I'm hoping to get to Eno and Naruto's core personalities, and I think I sort of failed this chapter. Sigh. We all wear dignity. It covers the strong, the weak. We all wear dignity, even the last, the lost, the least step into a spacious place, where pride and right will give way to the least of these. To know the face of who a man can be. Reliant K, the last, the lost, the least, the bird and the besides. You summoned me, Tsunade-sama. The godime clasped her hands in front of her face with a serious look. I have an important request. Eno's curiosity perked. A request. She was standing in a yard with the 5th Hokage, and she was rather confused. She looked at her sensei incredulously. You're not trying to shirk responsibilities by using me as an excuse, are you? Tsunade frowned. No, even if I would enjoy a break with some sake. No, you see, I need you to take care of things here for me. The younger ninja tilted her head. What do you mean? What's here to take care of? The godime sighed. There is a house on this property that needs taking care of. Eno paused and looked around. What house? Tsunade smirked. The one right here. With that, she did a few hand signs and suddenly a piece of the area's barrier opened up with enough space for only the two of them to enter. Once inside, the barrier closed behind them and Eno looked around in awe. Tsunade-sama. A large lot of about an acre, perhaps more, Eno wasn't sure, held a house surrounded with plants. She headed towards the house in excitement and Tsunade followed slowly behind her. The young ninja was quick to find the rare and exotic plants from other countries that she had dreamed of being able to one day see, let alone touch and care for. It was a complete thrill, exhilarating her quickly into the realization that all of these things were right here in her village. Tsunade-sama, what? Why are all of these things here? Tsunade smiled sadly. It was something the Yondaime had planned together with the ones that were the most precious to him. This house and everything surrounding it. It's a show of his dreams and hopes from before the Kyuubi attack. Eno nodded, sadly, yet, she couldn't help but still be bewildered as to why she was the one being given this task. Surely there were others more suited with this sort of responsibility. Why is this place sealed off? I don't understand. Tsunade looked towards the sky. By now, I'm sure this property would have been raided of all its good and destroyed to keep it from the true owner's hands. It almost did actually happen if the records are anything to go by. That's why the third sealed the area away. At first, it was a symbol for the people, but it quickly turned into a place where one's hate, anger, and sadness was be let out upon and, well, after the area was closed off, people seemed to forget about it and focused their sights on a different target. But why would they do that to the fourth's belongings? Wasn't he a hero? Of course. But there's an entirely different matter involved, and that in itself is its own separate secret I can't tell you about. For his protection. If he decides to tell you himself, that's different. But even he doesn't know about this. Why not Sakura? Or, why me? Tsunade thought a moment. Well, other than the plants, I think you might find some of the things left behind very interesting. There are some rooms, and even a whole floor you won't be allowed access to. But, I figure you could train here, and maybe learn some things on your own about life. Eno thought it over, letting the whole puzzle that had placed in her lap settle. Tsunade's reasoning still made no sense. So, will you take care of the property? When you're away on a mission, Shizune can take care of things. I just wouldn't trust her with it for more than a week. Eno thought a moment. I accept. Though, you will be giving me guidelines on how to go about doing this, correct? Tsunade smirked. Of course. Eno felt a headache coming on. 2 weeks later found Eno in the village archives for each clan. The first week cleaning and tidying the fourth's old house brought up an unusual question that was rather peculiar. A swirl pattern, similar to that on Naruto's jacket, was everywhere. At first, she'd thought nothing of it until she'd decided to bring the jacket with her because of the growing fall chill, and realized the connection. At first, it almost annoyed her till she thought that maybe not even Naruto himself knew why he was so attached to the pattern, or if it was even of any significance to his heritage. Also, why was it that Naruto's teacher would feel it was important enough to keep on Naruto's person as well, even with the fashion upgrade? Eno sighed as she continued shuffling through refugee papers. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But this is just ridiculous. Naruto's jacket, paintings and metal works on walls, and the clan name, Uzumaki, is all she had to go by. Heck, for all she knew, Uzumaki could have been made up to simply give him a last name. So she could even be on a pointless wild goose chase. She leant back in her seat and looked towards the ceiling, thinking a moment and going back to that strange three-pronged kunai she had found in her parents' storeroom. The two blonde teenagers looked at the opened blue box with surprise, taking in the strange weapon held within its casing, 3 prongs. Naruto tilted his head to the side. How in the world would that even work when thrown? Eno smirked a little. She remembered how bad Naruto was at throwing kunai in his younger days. You know, as great as I am at throwing, I'm not even too sure. I suppose Tenten could throw it well enough. Naruto nodded a moment. I guess. He paused. Hey Eno. You mind if I take it out of the box and look at it a moment? Eno blinked. He's actually asking. She rolled her shoulders. Sure. Naruto took the strange weapon out carefully, taking extra care to not mess with the paper on its hilt. It was only when the blow NDE boy removed the weapon that she realized, there's a seal on it. He nodded, examining it carefully. Yeah. Seals are something Ero Sennin is interested in and good at. He started teaching me basics. But it all sort of just goes in one ear and out the other. Eno watched him examine it, a little amazed that Naruto seemed calm about not being able to understand something very well. He usually was all gung-ho about overcoming things, but this, it seemed he wanted to take time to learn. The fact made her smile a little, seeing him so focused on something was so rare. After a moment's pause, Naruto frowned. It's high-level stuff. That's all I know. He sighed. It's too bad we can't unwrap it without ruining it, and I definitely don't want to do that. The seal's far too complicated to just ruin it. He handed it over to her, and she examined it for a while herself before putting it away. It wasn't until a week later she found the note hidden in the bottom of the box. It had been a long 6 days since the beginning of her search for anything to make things connect. She took a moment to rub her temples, stretch, and then once again proceeded in her search. After another grueling couple of hours, and the thought of giving up, who'd have known so many Uchiha had come in and out of Konaha, for that matter? No. What the hell? It almost seemed like she'd never see the end of At clan name before hitting new clans. At last she finally hit something of worth. A page hidden away and marked up so badly you almost couldn't get a single bit of information out of it, a page that was burnt around the edges. Carrying the image of a young woman with long red hair and a name. Eno breathed out softly under her breath in shock. Uzumaki Kushina. A page hidden away and marked up so badly you almost couldn't get a single bit of information out of it, a page that was burnt around the edges, carrying the image of a young woman with long red hair and a name. Eno breathed out softly under her breath in shock. Uzumaki Kushina. Eno stared at the page she held in her hands for what seemed like hours, taking in all that she could about the Whirlpool refugee. The picture was old, faded, damaged. And yet it still held everything she needed. She could see Naruto's nose, his chin, his mischievous eyes, all in this one woman who she had never met. She placed the old and tattered piece of paper in her lap softly, leaning back as she meditated on what she'd found. After a moment, she went back to the records to see if there was anyone else with the last name, and found there were none. This was it. It was all she had for any of the answers her brain could conjure. She looked at the piece of paper once more, being careful of its delicate nature due to its aged and fiery damage. Uzumaki Kushina, ninja of Whirlpool. She nodded to herself and carefully pressed her finger to a mostly undamaged spot on the page, and left a small chakra imprint so that she could relocate the page easily. It would only last for a few days, but the young ninja hoped it would be just long enough so that she could talk to Tsunade-sama about the matter and possibly have a small investigate on as of why the page was so horribly modeled. By no means were the markings and fire damage caused official means. It was definitely done by someone on the outside to mess with records. But why? Why would someone specifically go out of their way to eradicate someone's file, even if they were a refugee? Eno sighed heavily and wiped her forehead. That was enough. She could write up a report about it tonight. So with that thought in mind, she swiftly returned all the records she had removed back into their bindings and placement upon their shelves. Uzumaki Kushina, just looking at her picture. I'm sure she was a rather interesting ninja. She smirked to herself as she left the records office. Perhaps now I could ask my father about that little blue box with the kunai, and that letter. I'd really like to know who it was from. She made her way slowly home, stretching out her aching limbs from sitting too long, making what could have been a 10-minute run into a half-an-hour walk. She reflected on all she had learned through her investigation in the records office, while cleaning the Yondaime's home, and while tending the extensive garden outside the home. After she had started working on the garden, she had come to the realization that there were a lot of medicinal herbs and such, which explained some of why Tsunade put her in charge there. Not only was she a med nin, but she had extensive horticultural knowledge to fall back upon, and could easily replace a plant through special order if it became necessary without having to go through a bunch of papers. Eno yawned softly as she entered the flower shop. I'm home. Yuna looked up from a vase she was arranging flowers in and smiled, welcome back. What have you been up to all day? The young girl waved a hand, researching something. Yuna quirked an eyebrow. Was it because of something you saw while on your daily mission? Eno rolled her shoulders, kind of. I suppose you can't talk about though, can you? Nope. Of course. Yuna looked towards the entrance to her home. I believe your father came home just before you with dinner. You two can start ahead of me, I just need to finish that last book. Tea before tomorrow and closing up for the evening. Eno nodded. All right, thank you. Of course. She entered her home and made a quick run to her room where she changed out of her ninja uniform and put on a more relaxed outfit before heading to the dining room. There her father was just finishing setting up the dishes on the table. He looked up and smiled at her. Hey kiddo. Eno smiled. Hello father. Do anything interesting today? Inoichi shrugged. Delivering flowers to people really wasn't what I signed up for doing when I became a ninja. Eno smiled as she sat down. Of course not. There was a pause. How did your day go? She paused and thought about it a moment. All right. I found out something that was a little unexpected. I was glad to find it though, another piece of the puzzle. Inoichi nodded as he started eating, already knowing that Yuna would be a little while longer. The two Yamanaka ate in silence for a short while, as Eno tried to piece together just what it was she wanted to ask and say. Hey dad, in the storeroom the other day, I found a little blue box I'd never seen before. Inoichi paused and put down his bowl, trying to think of just what box she was talking about. Oh. Eno nodded slightly. Yeah, it had this really strange kunai in it, and after examining it the first time, I later found a note hidden away in it. Eno paused to gauge her father's reaction. Would you know anything about it? Inoichi paused, scrunching his face up a little. A strange kunai. Yeah, it had 3 prongs and some sort of seal. We were careful about that, since we didn't want to damage it. Her father's eyes widened a little with realization. That was in the storeroom. Eno nodded slowly. Yeah. I found it the day you wanted those scrolls. He looked at her, a moment before rubbing his face a little. I see, you made sure to be careful of the seal on the hilt. Eno nodded again. Yes. Father thought for a moment. You said, we. Who else was looking at it? Eno paused in panic. She didn't know why, but she wasn't sure if she should tell him, and yet, Naruto. Inoichi quirked an eyebrow. You were looking at it with Naruto. Why him? He would have thought she'd look at it with someone like Shikamaru or Sakura or something, not Naruto. Eno scratched behind her ear nervously, unsure of why she felt that way. Is it bad I was looking at it with him? It wasn't some sort of family heirloom or something, right? Well, no, I'm just, Naruto. I wasn't aware you really spoke with him. She relaxed. Oh, so that's what it is. She smiled. Just recently started trying to get to know him. He's nice. He helped me out a bit when sensei. Inoichi nodded. That I remember. Now, why with Naruto? Eno paused and thought about it. Why had she decided to share the secrets of the blue box with Naruto? Sure, it was a simple weapon with a very intricate seal, but was it simply because he was there at the time? I'm not really sure. I guess I'd made him dinner. My curiosity about the box's contents got the better of me and I decided we could both check it out. Inoichi looked at her curiously, but what if it had held a family secret? Eno blushed lightly. Well, I'm sure I could have done something to make him forget. Hit him with a frying pan or something. Her father stared at her a moment before chuckling. Right, next time. Be sure to check a box's contents of secrets first before running out. With it to look into with other people outside of the clan, got it? Eno blushed a little more deeply at her mistake. Yes, sir. Inoichi nodded and smiled to himself. So, the box held a 3-pronged kunai with a seal and a note. She nodded. Yeah. Do you have the box with you? She finished the last bite of her meal before answering. It's upstairs in my room. Should I go get it? Her father nodded. I would appreciate it if you would. Eno nodded and quickly made her way upstairs as her father resumed eating. She quickly went to her special safe and removed a few of her seals before grabbing the box and setting up the seals again. She walked back downstairs to find her mother had sat down at the table and started eating while she was away. Yuna looked away from Inoichi to her, quickly noticing the box and coming to a realization before going back to her meal calmly. Eno sat down once more and passed the box to her father. This is it. Her father had recognized it easily and looked it over. This isn't in too bad of shape considering how old it is. Eno blinked as he opened it and looked at the weapon inside. Instantly going into what seemed a past memory, we could tell it was old, just not how old. The older blonde nodded. I see. Well, this is from just before you were born. Well, maybe half a year or so. Eno's eyes widened a little. The box and everything in it were in quite good condition for their age then. She suddenly surprised herself with realizing how lucky it was that the folded note didn't break apart from being opened. All things considered, father carefully took out the weapon and examined it. I still wonder at the craftsmanship of it. Of course I would expect nothing but the best from someone like him. I'd almost forgotten he'd used this specific kind of kunai. You really can't find these anymore. Eno tilted her head slightly. Was it the person who wrote that note the one who used that kunai? Inoichi nodded absent-mindedly. Yes. It was his most preferred weapon combined with his most deadly technique. Eno paused. What do you mean? Her father looked to her. The seal on this tag is very special. And deals with a very special technique that helped shape one of our greatest Hokage. He became a legend in battle, and someone to be feared to the point of other villages posting a flee on sight warning. Quote. Eno paused again, thinking back to the letter's sender and the things she had learned in school. Flee on sight, a legend in battle, during a war perhaps. A special kunai that helped in the use of an incredible technique, and a name that was partially blurred to illegibility due to water. One day looking back, she was sure she could imagine logging at herself for how slow and stupid she was being. Yuna looked at Eno curiously. Is it really that hard to piece together? The girl blushed. The fourth Hokage. Her parents clapped to tease her. Bingo. Eno flushed more deeply. Feeling embarrassed, it took around 5 minutes of her thinking, just to guess something so obvious. Suddenly, a realization came to her. Wait a second. That was a girt to you from the 4th Hokage. Inoichi nodded. Yes, it was after we had been on a rough mission, and it was just after I'd learned Yuna was pregnant, so I was rather stressed that mission. Ino was shocked. So that was the 4th Hokage's handwriting. It was surprisingly sloppy. Inoichi smirked. So, you find anything at his house? I know you're the new caretaker keeping up the place. Ino looked down. Nothing really. Quote. Her father looked at her for a moment, humming softly to himself. No, I suppose not. The subject was dropped. Ino looked outside her open window as she sat resting on her bed. Her knees pulled halfway to her chest in a relaxed manner, thinking over all she'd learned that day. A special journal sat closed with a pen on top of it, having already written do. WN everything she felt was noteworthy, so she wouldn't forget before she had decided to contemplate quietly. Closing her eyes, she thought back to the note and smiled softly, remembering what she could from it in slight melancholy. Inoichi, congratulations. I know the news came rather abruptly just before leaving on our last mission and that it was hard, but I know it'll help give you an even stronger drive in the battlefield. I give you this gift as a show of friendship and as a comrade in battle. If you ever get in a bind, use it and I'll be there to help you, just as I was able to the other day. My final words of advice to you are this: always protect those most precious to you. Fight with and beside them, fight for them, and protect them with all that you have. If you do, you'll have no regrets in life. And your path will not waver. Oh, she smiled and thought over her ninja career and all that she had accomplished with her teammates and fellow ninja. The good times, the hard times, and even the sad ones. She took a moment to reflect on Asuma-sensei's life and all that he had done, and came to feel he had upheld the words from the note the Yondaime had written to a T. Asuma-sensei. NSEI had fought alongside his fellow ninja valiantly, and sure, he had perhaps taken a few wrong turns, but in the end, he had led a life that was without regret. No matter what had happened between him and his past comrades, all of his struggles within his life she would never know, to her. Asuma-sensei had lived his life to the fullest and felt that she could say he regretted nothing. Her though. TS then turned to Naruto as she brought his jacket to herself and wrapped it around herself to keep out the autumn chill that drifted from her window on a soft breeze. She reflected on all that she knew of him from the past and from what she had learned of him in the present. Naruto is someone I can call a precious friend, I think. With that thought, a solid decision was made. I'm going to talk to him more. And purposely seek him out. I'm going to be his friend, and not just Sakura's rival. She nodded to herself assuredly and smiled. I wonder what he thinks of me. Am I someone he thinks of as a precious person? Single quote. Eno suddenly realized with a small ache in her chest, I'd really like that. She would be sure to get to know him. She had to. Live. I wanna live inspired. Die. I wanna die for something higher than myself, live and die for anyone else. The more I live, I see this life's not about me. Burn out brighter, northern lights, Amberlin knew surrender. Naruto laid on his bed staring at his cracked and peeling ceiling, staring into nothing, and yet taking in all that was around him at once. It was one of those few mornings where meditation and contemplation was necessary. For something was coming over the horizon. He just didn't know what was looming in its shadow. He sighed heavily and closed his eyes, thinking back to words said and wondering about the ones not. Quote, what if Sasuke doesn't want to go with you? You said you thought of Sasuke as a brother. Well, I'm asking, what'd you do if Sasuke were to attack Konaha? Could you weigh Sasuke's life against Konaha? You're such a child. There are times when ninja must make painful choices. I've given you some of my power. I hope the day never comes when you have to use it. Uchiha Itachi, a man Sasuke knew as his older brother and the man who slaughtered his clan. What sort of man was he? Naruto's personal perspective was built around what little he knew of the older Uchiha brother, yet during their talk, Uchiha Itachi smiled, faintly, as if filled with a little hope from his foolish words. Did he imagine it? No, of course not. Despite being in a genjutsu, the power that Itachi shoved into Naruto was quite real. And it rested heavily in his mind and on his soul. Like a bird awaiting the end of the storm in its nest, it sat huddled in wait. Will it be caged forever, or will it burst with the embers and flame of a phoenix? Naruto turned over before pushing himself up, placing a hand to his forehead. This is stupid. Why did he keep remembering and studying his run-in with Itachi before he? Itachi was a dead man. For some odd reason, Naruto felt sad about it. He couldn't figure out why it was, but he felt something was lost. Something had gone horribly wrong down the line. And he would probably never know just what that was. Itachi smiled. It was absurd. Naruto hauled himself out of bed and got himself ready for the day, hoping it'd be better than yesterday. Oh God, how he was wrong. He studied him as he lay there, wondering if he was making the worst decision of his life. A young Anbu appeared by his side. Hokage-sama. The address turned slightly. Yes. The front lines have been decimated. We need you to go through with your plans soon. The older ninja nodded, tired and wishing his time hadn't run out so quickly. He'd made the final arrangements, but what about his final words? He took the carefully bound child from its holding place with strong, yet shaky hands. His breath held just barely a shudder as he turned. Will you accompany me a little? The young man stood and nodded, the family crest of a fan on his person. Minato ran swiftly from the hospital as the younger ninja following swiftly behind, studying his Hokage's back. What's your name? The younger stayed silent for a moment. Uchiha Itachi. The older blonde nodded. I see. Silence reigned the rest of their run, yet just at the halfway point to where the Kyuubi was attacking. The Yondaime stopped in his step for a moment. If you had to choose between those you loved and Konaha, what would you choose? Itachi paused. Choose. Yes. Konaha. Are your loved ones? Konaha. Because protecting Konaha also protects the people I care about. The fourth Hokage thought for a second before nodding and looking back to the young Uchiha and smiling. Remember those words. Thank you. The man disappeared with the child, only for the boss toad to be summoned a moment later up ahead and to continue on to Kyuubi's path. A man had never faced death itself with such fervor. To put it simply, he was a mess. A mess of emotion and angst. He couldn't believe it. A man who had trained and raised him, cared for him and watched as he progressed into adulthood. Jiraiya was dead. Jiraiya knew so much and had much to teach him, yet Naruto's training by no means was complete. And now his teacher was dead. The old man's death hurt his heart, constricted his chest in ways he never felt before. He grieved for him in a totally different way than he had for Haku, or for Gaara and his suffering. Yet, Jiraiya, this was far worse. His world had been turned upside down. One day he was there, and the next, he was gone. The good-for-nothing money-stealing, skirt-chasing, trashy novel writer was really dead. Naruto felt crushed. His world was grayed. He'd never felt this sort of consuming grief before. How in the world could such a guy die like that? The young blonde sat at the riverbank by the bridge, sitting and staring at the water with a blank expression on his face. It was silent, and no one would be there at this time of day, so he could be left in peace. He was conflicted. There was so much he needed to discuss with Ero Sennin, and now he's not coming back. It made him want to curl up into himself. Why did he have to do something so stupid? He intook a shuddered breath. Jiraiya was one of those people who were supposed to grow very old and enjoyed doing WH. He did until he died of natural causes. Naruto. The blonde clenched a fist at the sound of his name and replied flatly, what? Eno paused, taken aback slightly. She had heard about what had happened and had rushed out to see him. But now she wondered if it would have been better to come to him later in the evening. She breathed quietly, deciding to go and sit a few feet away from him, to give him some sort of comfort while also trying to be mindful of his personal space. It hurts, doesn't it? Naruto pulled his legs close to his chest, placing his folded arms on the top of his knees as he rested his head lightly on one of the sides of his arms. He couldn't really be mad at Eno for wanting to help him. He knew he'd done the same for her. He just wished she would have left him alone for a while longer. He didn't really want to talk. I guess. Eno nodded to herself, staring at the water's flow and staying silent and contemplative. It felt like hours before Naruto felt his agitation fade away. Before he began to feel gratitude. He was starting to be happy he had Eno's silent support. He really had absolutely no idea how to deal with grief. He didn't have a lot of people who he loved and had that love returned. There was a little shuffle of movement before Eno sat down next to him, opposite his position, and before he realized what was happening, he felt strong arms surround him and pull him close. His arms had become instantly limp before awkwardly wrapping around her lithe form and suddenly realizing what was going on. Eno was hugging him, trying to comfort him in he'd never experienced, and suddenly he felt the tears he'd tried to hold back suddenly break loose. He held her a little closer to himself awkwardly before he focused his eyes on the ground as he closed his eyes tightly, attempting to hold in the fresh wave of grief. Eno felt awkward about the whole thing herself, yet, she couldn't help but feel the need to hug him and give him a chance to cry. How else was he going to be able to release his emotions? What could jolt him to keep him from bottling it up? She couldn't remember a time he had been embraced. Of course there was a lot of his life she couldn't account for, but had anyone ever held him as a child? Had he ever felt a motherly comfort? She knew she was stepping on boundaries and personal space that she more than likely had no right to cross, and yet, who else but her? Who else could carry out this task for him before it was too late? She felt him awkwardly wrap his arms around her, confused before something clicked, and he held her a little closer, a barely noticeable tremor running through him as he did so. "I'm sorry." She felt his grief so strongly and couldn't help but feel her eyes burn as tears started to pour down her cheeks alongside him. They cried for their loss, and she cried for him and all that was lost. Despite all of this, she only hoped he remembered. Naruto. He jolted slightly, but she didn't relinquish her hold on him, so he relaxed again. "What?" Eno paused. "Can you do me a favor?" He didn't trust his voice as much as she didn't hers. "Don't forget." Naruto stared ahead, his eyes waterlogged with tears. "Yeah. Look, children, to the eastern sky. When you hear the voice say your last goodbyes, look there to the eastern skies. When the ghosts take hold of the men who died, look, children, to the eastern sky. When your fathers weep and your mothers cry, look, children, to the eastern sky. Look, children, to the eastern sky. Anberlin Misarbal Visu ex malo bonum new surrender." There were cries in the night. The smell of blood, smoke, and fear burned in the air as the growls and cries of dying men were heard. Harsh breathing against the chains, the pain, the agonizing reality of what was going on. It was completely unnatural, and should not have occurred. Yet it was. The chakra burned at the touch, his skin peeled in the wake of that destructive force. The feeling was completely new and unwanted, and it had never occurred until that night. Then, sweet mercy came and stopped the internal flame. Naruto gasped as he awoke to the twittering of birds and sunshine, sheets soaked with sweat and cold fear. He sat up slowly and brought a hand to the side of his face. Just what in the hell was that? Single quote. It was day number 3 that these nightmares had been occurring. Like someone else's memories, maybe, Kyuubi's, were running through his head, laughing at him in their obscurity. Did this happen in the past? Single quote. Perhaps we shall see. Naruto froze. The furball rarely spoke to him directly without his purposely going to the seal and seeking him out, so you have no idea what that dream means. Silence met him. The Kyuubi wasn't going to speak to the ball of dirt any more than necessary. And that was just fine with Naruto. It was better that way. The 15-year-old genin decided enough was enough, and got himself out of bed. Today's going to suck. Datbeo. Meanwhile, Ino Yamanaka stretched as she walked through Konaha looking for a good place to eat breakfast with Sakura. It had been a while since they'd spoken and she had questions to ask. Sakura eyed her with an unusual quirk. "How can you handle wearing that?" The blonde Kunoichi blushed to herself and looked at her current attire. Usual netting, and purple ensemble, topped off with Naruto's orange and black jacket. Her inner fashion guru was sobbing. Ino laughed awkwardly. "It's a little cold this morning, don't you think?" Sakura looked at her friend's outfit. "I think pants would have done you more good than that thing." Ino blinked, only to glare at Sakura. "As his teammate, I would think you could talk to him about his tastes in colors. He likes you well enough, I'm sure if you dragged him out and found something he'd buy it to please you." Sakura looked to the ground in annoyance. "Of course he would. But that's manipulative." Ino nodded. "Exactly. If the colors really bother you, You could just tell him. Sakura snorted, as if that'd stop him. Eno paused mentally. No, it wouldn't, would it? Does he wear those colors because he has to, or because he wants to? Both girls stop. In time for Yamato to appear in front of them. Sakura, we've been summoned by Tsunade-sama. Sakura looked to Eno apologetically. It seems we'll have to postpone the girl chat. The blonde waved offhandedly. It happens. We'll just have to reschedule. The pink kunoichi nodded and left with her temporary sensei, leaving Eno alone in the street. She sighed and walked towards her favorite tea and coffee house. Eno entered Ran's shop, the light chime of a bell being the only thing to announce her entrance. Welcome to my shop, favored customer. The blonde looked over and smiled at the chocolate-haired owner. Good morning, Ran. Quote. Ran blinked. Oh, Eno. It's been a while since you've visited. The older girl looked Eno over quickly, and I see you have an interesting accessory today. Now, would you like the usual or something else? Eno felt herself blushing. That really needed to stop before it became a problem, as she shook her head. No, today I'd like a cup of your special green tea and some strawberry daifuku. Ran nodded and went into the kitchen, leaving Eno to choose a window seat for two. She rested her chin on her hand as she watched people stroll by, starting their days peacefully and full of normalcy. Ran placed Eno's order in the middle of the table and sat across from her. Knowing the shop wouldn't be busy for a while yet, it seems you're rather melancholy today, Eno. Eno started a little, surprised she had spaced out. Ah, yes, I guess so. She took her tea and stirred it idly. I have a lot on my mind. And most of it deals with Naruto. The least likely guy to be mysterious, dark, and obscure. Ran nodded solemnly, her blue eyes dimmed a little, before brightening in slight mischief. Ah, poor Naruto-kun. It seems his prized jacket is still out of his reach, nay. Eno flustered. Ran. That's, well, The shop owner laughed kindly. Oh Eno, you really do seem to have a lot troubling you. The kunoichi sighed and fell back in her seat. It's true. I've been pondering Naruto's past a lot lately, and I've been discovering some unusual things and, well, it's all just gelling together. Ran nodded and looked up a little, in contemplation. Would you mind if I told you a story? Eno studied her friend for a moment. No, I wouldn't mind at all. Ran took in a deep breath and exhaled slowly before beginning her story. I grew up with a bow. Who was incredibly obsessed with old texts and stories. He would babble on and on about the past, and the unusual clans and jutsu he discovered. Due to his interests, people had a hard time connecting with him, and since I had grown up with him, I was all he had. Slowly, I realized I loved this friend of mine more than as a friend, and he became an incredibly precious person to me, but then one day, he disappeared. Eno blinked. He disappeared. Ran nodded. After he had gone missing for a week I went to his house to see if he had returned. Nothing was moved from the day when I had seen him last. It was like he had been spirited away or something. Was he ever found? No. To this day, Shinichi is still utterly and completely gone. Tears built up in the shop owner's eyes as she looked to Eno directly. Don't let what happened to Shinichi and I happen to you. A ninja's life can be long or short, and love can easily be lost. Do everything you can with confidence, and even if your feelings are rejected, you at least can have no regrets, because life is simply too short to be burdened with them. Eno felt the tears build up in her eyes as she reflected on the fourth Hokage's note. And the face of a red-haired smiling kunoichi, the faint smell of cigarettes and rain filled her senses as she lifted a hand to her face to wipe away the tears in a sudden rush of emotion. Yes. Life really is much too short to make second guesses. Ran nodded. Eno. The kunoichi looked to her friend. Yes. Be good to Naruto, alright. I don't want to say him any more hurt than he has been already. Eno studied Ran carefully. Have you heard something? Ran smiled in a somewhat fake way. It isn't anything I can really talk with you about. She was surprised, and yet not. All of the adults were like that when dealing with Naruto, weren't they? I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Single quote. She never would have guessed some of her answers were going to literally end up on her doorstep. Eno jumped at the sudden flurry of activity that had entered her shop, and before she even understood what was going on, Naruto slammed his hand on the counter of the flower shop and pointed behind him. Do you see anything at all interesting about this tem here behind me? The kunoichi tried to shake off her nerves and looked at the other highly disheveled boy that had been dragged into her shop. Cropped gray hair, blue eyes, unusual clothing, a monk of the fire temple perhaps, a snide smirk, and the air of someone who felt they were better than someone else in the room. The blonde girl quirked an eyebrow. Who's that? Naruto grabbed his hair in frustration. My name is Sora, and I have no interest in wasting my time talking to some girl about flowers and their tastes in boys. Eno clenched her teeth and fist. I hate this guy already. Who the hell does he think he is? Bastard. She slammed a fist to the counter. How dare you come in here assuming things of me? I'm Eno Yamanaka, student of the Godime, Tsunade-sama. If you dare demean me and my family's business, I can promise you'll regret it dearly. Quote. Sora sneered and pushed the door to the shop open. As if I care about your opinion anyway. Eno took a deep enraged breath, then stay the hell away from our shop. Sora glared at her as the door shut. No problem there. With that, the newcomer was gone, leaving Naruto with an enraged kunoichi on his hands. That's Sora. Naruto rubbed his head a bit. He's so frustrating. But I have to keep an eye on him. He looked to her apologetically. Sorry about that. I'll be sure to buy a flower or two to make up for it, alright? Eno blinked. Sure. She watched as Naruto left, and then jumped. Naruto. The boy stopped just as he was about to release the door and looked to her confused. What? Eno left the counter and stopped halfway to the door. She hated herself for feeling so awkward. Are we friends? Naruto blinked and took a step back in the store. Eno clenched a fist. I'd like to know if we're friends, Naruto. He looked at her for a moment before smiling. Of course we are. Haven't we been friends since we were genin? She looked at him and blinked, startled. Naruto waved. Well, I better catch up to that jerk before he causes more trouble. See you later, Eno-chan. With a flash of orange, and a yell ahead of him. Naruto, the most surprising ninja, left, leaving Eno a little confused, and perhaps, guilty. Has he really thought of us as friends since our genin days? Single quote. Shish. Let the fact sink in for quite some time, and slowly, a smile found its way on her face. I won't lose, Asuma-sensei, I won't. Single quote. Naruto awoke in the middle of the night, his breathing heavy as he stared at his cracked and peeling ceiling. That dream again. This was dream number 6, and it was starting to take a toll on his body. How long will I have to deal with this? Single quote. Perhaps, until Sora deals with his inner demons. Naruto felt a sheen of cold sweat immediately surface. Wahoo. You know, I gave you some of my power, didn't I? Oh good lord in heaven. Naruto closed his eyes tightly. I'm just dreaming. I'm just dreaming. I'm just dreaming. Like a crow settling itself in its nest, something silenced, and Naruto fell asleep once more. Naruto. He looked at Ero Sennin in annoyance. What? The old man regarded him for a moment, putting down his pen. It's been quite some time since we've started training you in using Kyuubi's chakra, and communicating with it, correct? He blinked, confused. Yeah, so what? Jiraiya leaned back slightly. You need to get a better grip on your emotions, Naruto. If you don't, the people around you will get hurt by your own hand. And it gives the Kyuubi a stronger reign of control. Naruto paused, thinking this over. So, Jiraiya sighed and looked him dead on the eye. If you fail to keep your head in difficult situations, one day, Kyuubi might devour you. No matter how much thought has gone into that seal the fourth placed on you, it can only do so much and it is starting to weaken. Naruto woke up once more. His nerves a jumbled mess as he jumped up and ran to the bathroom, only to be met with purple-tinted eyes. It's true, it is an oh god, I'm being haunted by a dead man. He needed help, fast. But who could he turn to? Who in the world could help him? Eno flashed in his mind, and the memory of her mind switch jutsu. Her father's on call for interrogation, isn't he? Eno and her family's jutsu would be perfect for this sort of thing. Right, the Kyuubi flashed in his mind then, making him shudder. No. That would be bad, wouldn't it? Sakura. I can trust Sakura knowing and accepting me, but Eno. He shuddered once more as he imagined that confrontation, definitely not a good idea. He dressed and finished his morning routine, only to come to a realization, just the other day. Why I told her we were friends ever since we were genin, and now I'm backing out. As if we're total strangers. He grabbed his right arm, remembering their awkward embrace by the river. No, we are friends. It may not have seemed like it at the time, but we've been friends since then, and she is the first person to ever give me that kind of affection willingly. She deserves to know, just as much as Sakura-chan, doesn't she? A ninja must have a clear mind. This hold even truer for someone such as yourself, a Jinshu. Shut up. Naruto gasped and felt dizzy at his mental outburst and flurry of thoughts. This was getting out of hand far too fast. I need to talk to Eno. Single quote. He hurried out of his apartment and quickly found himself on Eno's street. He made his way to the shop, and found it closed. It really is too early for this, Datbeo. Naruto sighed and went around to the side door and knocked awkwardly. He was really the type to just waltz in. Yuna opened the door in confusion. Naruto-kun. He looked at her sheepishly and smiled, trying his best to seem calm. Is Eno-chan available? She blinked. Yes. Hold on, if you don't mind coming in for a moment. Naruto brought his hands up, as if to placate her. No, I'll stay out here, thanks. Yuna arched a brow. If you say so. She left him at the doorway, leaving Naruto to hear some mumbling before Eno appeared before him. Naruto-kun. Naruto shuffled a little and rubbed the back of his head awkwardly as she looked at him strangely. Eno. I need some help. The kunoichi paused and looked behind her a moment. I'll be out for a while. Yuna replied, of course. Be sure to eat, Eno. Eno rolled her eyes. Yeah. She closed the door behind her and took Naruto's arm, dragging him along. He was startled by her action and fumbled in his steps and words for a few moments. Eno. She looked to him. If you're coming to me for help, it has to be important, right? Naruto nodded dumbly. All right then. Would the park be good? Naruto looked at the park that had appeared on the horizon, void of anyone. Sure. The girl nodded and continued her march as the boy simply allowed her to drag him. He needed to collect his thoughts anyway. Once they reached the park, she led him over to the swings and sat, aware of the fact that he was incredibly nervous if the unusually cold and clammy hands were anything to go by. All right, Naruto. We should be able to talk privately here. Naruto nodded and joined her on the swings, wrapping his arms and hands around the old chains. I've been. No. Eno observed him, one thing at a time. He looked at her confused for a moment, and slowly he realized she could tell how mixed up he was. It was embarrassing, right? Well, Vent. Told anyone about this, so you'll be the first. You see, when we were trying to find Sasuke last time, just before we ran into that Madara guy, I ran into Itachi Uchiha. Eno jolted. What? Naruto ignored her and kept going. He did something to me. He said that he had given me some of his power, while I was trapped in his genjutsu, and, while at first I wasn't sure if it had actually happened, I think, no. I know he did give me some of his power, and perhaps a little more. Eno was shocked. What? Why are you telling me this? Naruto felt sweat trail down the side of his face as he looked at her, his masks torn off, leaving him a total wreck and making the extent of his fear obvious. Because he's in my head, Eno, and I need your help straightening this all out before I lose it and accidentally give Kyuubi control. Because he's in my head, Eno, and I need your help straightening this all out before I lose it and accidentally give Kyuubi control. His words echoed in her thoughts, chilling her to the bone. His expression was difficult for Eno to swallow along with the information he'd just dumped on her plate. It was impossible, yet it made complete sense. Why just giving it a few seconds worth of thought? She swallowed thickly. Naruto. Her voice was unusually raspy. Sweat trickled down the side of his face. Yeah. Could you tell me about the Kyuubi first? I think I need to know more about that first, before I can help you at all with your problem with Itachi. Yes, Naruto. That was a little much and unwise. Naruto shook himself and moved his gaze to the ground, allowing the chains of the swings to dig into his skin. Right. Well, he had to think about this carefully. Why was it so much easier with Sakura? Was it because Gaara was dying? The Kyuubi isn't something that can really be killed, same with the other tailed beasts, I guess. When the Kyuubi attacked Konaha, the only solution was to seal him. From what I've come to know and understand, it's only really possible to do this with newborns since their chakra pathways haven't fully formed, and I just so happened to have the bad luck of being born on the day Kyuubi attacked. Eno pondered this for a while, silence reigning between the two blondes. One, attempting to keep a rein on his sanity and to shut up the annoying black crow in the back of his head, and the other simply digesting information. October 10th, the day the fourth Hokage died, and the day Naruto was born, but you couldn't have been the only one born that day and year, Naruto. He nodded. I know that now, but even so, I don't have any idea why I was the one chosen. I don't know anything about my parents, and yet, despite being cursed with being a Jinchuriki, the person who first showed he most care for me was the guy who used me as the keeper. Quote, Eno observed her companion again, watching his features and studying him as he spoke. So, was it the Yondaime who sealed the Kyuubi inside of you? Naruto nodded. For whatever reason, it seemed like it was the only option at the time. She closed her eyes, thinking back to all she knew. She then looked towards the Hokage monument and studied the fourth Hokage's features that had been carved upon its rough surface. A praised hero and legendary ninja. If there was anything to go by from the old textbooks, he had shocking yellow hair and unusually bright blue eyes. She tried to picture the monument's face with these colors as she thought. He wanted me to be known as a hero of the people, and to be treated well. Eno started as she turned to him. Noticing that he had joined her in gazing at the monument, it was his last dying wish. He made an unusually sarcastic snicker and facial expression. The people betrayed him in his death, you know. He wanted something so simple, but instead they hailed him as hero, and I the demon. His bitterness ran so cold and deep, despite all that he showed to the world. His mask had crumbled and fallen before her, and she honestly wasn't sure how to react. Normal Naruto she could yell at or laugh with, but this Naruto was completely new. It was also probably very good for Naruto to have someone to vent these things to. So that's why nice people like Mrs. Tachikawa could become so bitchy. Eno gave him a look that he reciprocated with a small smirk. Yeah. Sure, I'd prefer horrible, but whatever. So, it's because the Kyuubi was sealed inside of you, and everyone blames you for the Yondaime's death and thinks you yourself are the Kyuubi itself. Naruto paused. Yup, that about sums it up. Eno sighed heavily and slumped. I would have never thought a place like Konaha could do that to one of its own citizens. Naruto huffed. It doesn't help that I found out about it the night after everyone had graduated from a teacher who'd only been using me to get the Yondaime's sealing scroll and planning to kill me. Eno stared at Naruto shocked for a while before he got bothered. What? I kicked his ass with the Kage Bunshin. It's the only reason I learned that move and graduated. Besides, I'm grateful, if only because I learned why everyone hated me. Eno smacked her forehead. Naruto, only you could take something so life-shattering and make it into sarcastic banter that amuses mainly yourself. I didn't think it was funny. Well, of course not, but still. You were so serious a moment ago. Naruto looked at her blankly for several minutes until he finally broke into a wide grin and laughed. Eno, to be frank, was disturbed. What the hell is so funny? The blonde just laughed and waved her off. Nothing, it's just, here I was, wanting you to go into my head and try and sort this whole Itachi thing out, and I end up telling you about the furball and just. He sobered up a bit, and got an unusually peaceful look about him. I'm glad you don't seem to hate me. Eno's eyes widened. Naruto thought she'd hate him for having the Kyuubi sealed in him. Why would you think that? He looked at her oddly. Why shouldn't I? With how I've been treated and, well, he scratched his head, it's sort of hard to explain. It clicked. You're afraid of being rejected by us, aren't you, Naruto? Naruto sighed heavily. It's my daily nightmare. Give me your report. Kakashi nodded solemnly. There seems to be some unusual activity at the outer walls. But otherwise things seem quiet. Tsunade's brows furrowed in aggravation. We aren't getting anywhere with this enemy, are we? It seems not. The slug Sanin growled, and Sora. Kakashi turned to the other occupant of the room, Yamato, MMH. He seems to be getting along decently with Naruto, but he seems rather untrusting. Tsunade nodded and leaned back into her chair, facing to the side as she clasped her hands. Keep your guards up. The two Junin nodded and made a hasty exit. 4 dead men, 5 unusual ninja, and 1 teenage monk who has an attitude problem. As usual, the odds were stacked up against her, but as always in gambling, she always played to win. It just didn't help that if she won, she truly lost something far greater than the initial loss. A soft rapping came to her door. Tsunade-sama. The older beauty turned towards the door. Come in. Eno carefully opened and closed the door, a stack of files in her hands. I have some papers here for you to look over. Tsunade grumbled. As usual. Eno set the stack of medical reports down, keeping one file to herself. Tsunade noticed this. What's that you have there? The younger Kunoichi shifted nervously. I was looking over a medical file. Tsunade studied her for a moment. Whose? Eno knew she was in trouble, but she hadn't been able to help herself at the time. Naruto's. The older woman's eyes became sharp as she clasped her hands in front of her face. Why would you need to look through his medical files? What use or purpose do they serve you? Eno shuffled, knowing the sort of trouble she was in. I had a thought, and found myself wondering whether or not Naruto has been born premature. Explain yourself. At least Eno would be given the ability to elaborate. Well, Naruto told me about the Kyuubi. And Tsunade jerked up. What? He told you. When did this happen? Yesterday morning. The slug Sanin leant back in her seat and waved a hand. Continue your little theory then. Eno blinked and nodded. I was wondering if he'd been born early because he seems to always lag a bit behind physically. I can't say for sure of course, but he was unusually short for his age back when we were growing up. Tsunade looked at Eno seriously for several minutes, causing the younger ninja to experience a heavy dose of anxiety. You would be correct. Eno's eyes widened. What? Tsunade held up a hand. This information doesn't leave the room. Eno placed Naruto's file on top of the stack on Tsunade's desk and nodded. The older woman thought back. Kyuubi's attacks had been tracked since he came close to our borders. At the time, it seemed that it would go past the village. Yet, it suddenly changed its course and made a beeline for the heart of Konaha. This caused a scramble on the Yondaime's part, and the completion of the method to seal it. However, the necessity of a newborn child for the sealing made things incredibly difficult for him, since who would ever be willing to give up their child for another person? So as the Kyuubi drew nearer, I was approached by Naruto's mother who knew about the fort's predicament. We discussed for a whole week until I decided that she would not back down from her offer, and so, the Yondaime was informed of the plan she and I had come up with. At first, he was adamantly against it, but as the Kyuubi drew closer to the village, the High Council gave him an ultimatum, and a decision had to be made. October 9th, at 9 o'clock in the evening, the decision was made for him as the Kyuubi entered the city limits, destroying an outer wall of the village. I was called with a team, and Naruto's mother went into induced labor for 8 hours until Naruto was born. He was then brought to the Yondaime, and from there, well, most can only guess what happened in the meantime, but many can tell what the final product of their efforts were. Kyuubi was sealed by sunrise that day of October 10th. Eno clenched her hands, trying to process all of this. Tsunade's expression turned ironic. It's amazing. The things that happened to that boy soon after he was born was what drove me away from the village, and yet 12 years later is the very thing that brought me back. Eno could only find it in herself to cry for the incredible loss. Next chapter. City on fire. Are flooded with zombies. Take your pick. I hope to get that far. Goodness knows we don't need to make the Sora arc last any longer than necessary. Haha. You know, finding out Shinichi played violin was shocking to me. It makes complete sense, but I either forgot the fact, or they just decided to throw it in there since it makes his ability to read notes make sense, considering how bad he is at singing, thus, moot point. Rugs, hooray for movie 12 OVA of Detective Conan dies. Hope you enjoyed. Nervous. What was left behind? Big thank you to Celtic Reaper, Grumpy Winter, Namikaze 777, Mrs. N. Uzumaki, Dark Ravi, Omega Hurricane, Funny Laugh, Croman. Hartaramo, Crabby Old Hobbit, Ryu Vision, Someone 179, Devin Warren, Saiyan Prince 1. I was wrong about the band name last chapter. It's Capital Lights. I keep getting it wrong. XD. A note about the premature thing. I'm not 100% sure if I really should be using the word premature, or if I should say early. Either way, it's as it is. I'm just going to let you all know I have uncertainties about the terminology. You know, in case someone in the future decides to flip out on me about that. XD. Some things were left hanging. Of course they were, 'cause then you'll come back. XD. I did things on purpose, because an answer can't always happen right away, and other things get in the way of knowledge. Shrugs. Finally. It's not really my B-day anymore since it's 1:21 a.m. on WED, but, meh. It's still Tuesday to me. XD. Wish me a belated happy birthday. Huzzah. Okay. Now it's 2:37 on Thursday, and only the Eno Naruto conversation's been done. I hope the conversation isn't too awkward. Size time to get on to the fight. I just started writing here, and my cat Peaches just hit me. No, seriously, she hit me with her paw a couple times, which she never does because she wanted to be on my lap. What a punk. Dear iTunes, it's officially been 1 month. Post. Anti-Meridian. DX. Pulls hair. I hope I'm not making Eno overly weepy. I just thought of that. As usual, no beta. Sorry, you'll find me face down, hands bound, ready for the blade to make me too. If judgment falls to meet this ground, that fate will run me through, no day of wrath will see me EAK for that faithless breath of shame when the heretics come to make that list, be true to speak my name Demon Hunter, grand finale, storm the gates of hell. 2 days had passed slowly, leaving Eno to recollect herself and reorganize all of the information she had gathered. She walked slowly through the early morning streets of Konaha dressed in her ninja gear, and wearing Naruto's jacket. She lasped the slightly tattered and worn orange and black fabric close to herself to try and keep out the chill of the early morning as she walked. Things were going to happen today, good or bad, things were going to happen. It was like there was living, breathing electricity in the air all around the village. Eno looked around herself, highly alert. It's unusually creepy this morning. She paused in her stroll in front of Naruto's apartment and stared up at the floor that he lived on. It really was a drab place to have to live. Naruto has to live like this because of the cruelty of the villagers, yet I just don't understand how and why he could still want to protect everyone so fiercely. It seems almost unnatural. As she stared up at Naruto's floor, his back door suddenly opened and he appeared on his balcony and stretched. He immediately noticed her looking. Ino-chan. The kunoichi smiled awkwardly, feeling a little embarrassed she'd been caught looking at his balcony. Hi Naruto-kun. He scratched his head. What are you doing all the way out here? Eno paused. Well. Naruto looked around a moment and gave her a directional nod. How about we talk inside? Eno blinked. And nodded as Naruto went back into his apartment. She pondered. I suppose it really is a bit early to have a conversation between 3 floors, a bit too open. She walked into the complex and up the stairs until he reached his floor, where she found him waiting and fully dressed for the day by the door. She smirked. You got dressed fast. Naruto shrugged. Ero Sennin was good at making me get ready last second. Eno nodded and let herself in, Naruto closing the door behind her. She was happy to find his apartment was warm, so Naruto walked to the kitchen and started making himself breakfast. What brings you over here, Eno? He looked at her curiously from the stove as she went and sat at the table. She shrugged, releasing the jacket from her grip. I've been thinking over a lot of things as of late. He watched her silently for a moment. Like what? Can you talk about it? Her gaze met his. I'm not completely sure. Naruto gave her a confused look. What do you mean? She pondered a moment, resting back on her seat. It's just, Eno steeled herself. I've been investigating your past. His eyes widened, confusion and perhaps a small bit of agitation showing through. Investigating. Eno looked down and clasped her hands together. I know I don't really have A right to be looking for personal information on you that you yourself might not even know but. He walked over abruptly and sat across the table from her, a cup on instant ramen in one hand, and a cup of tea in the other which he placed in front of her. What have you found out? Eno blinked and looked at him confused. Huh. Naruto scratched his head. I know I should be angry, but damn it, I haven't even really thought about that stuff in a long time, who my parents were and stuff. I never got answers, so, I just stopped asking questions. She studied him a minute. So, are you angry with me for looking? He sighed. A little, but if you've actually gotten information, then I'd be happy to hear it, I think. I mean, you're the first person I know who's actually gotten information and is willing to tell it. Eno clenched her hands a little, but that's the problem, I'm not sure what I can cannot tell you. Some of it's personal, and yet you have every right to know and it's all very difficult to work out. Naruto studied her, trying to come to an understanding. So you want to tell me, but. She looked at him suddenly freaked out. A few days ago I was told a great deal of highly classified information surrounding the time before your birth, and I'm personally sort of really upset about it. I want to tell you. But at the moment, it still hurts too much and is too fresh. Also, I still don't know who your parents were, exactly, so I'd really like to try and look into it a bit more. He looked at her a little shocked. Oh. He thought a moment. So you're still trying to cope and organize things in your mind, huh? Kinda like Sakura-chan, always needing all the facts. Eno growled, comparing me to Sakura as just, Naruto. Quote, he laughed at her glare. I'm sorry, but there is some truth to it. She sighed heavily and took off his jacket, resting it behind her since she was getting a little too hot. Whatever. Naruto slurped up his ramen quickly and Eno rolled her eyes. I wish I could tell you something, Naruto. He shrugged as he finished. I've waited 15, a little longer won't kill me. It sucks though, Datbeo. Eno nodded. He paused a moment. Hey Eno-chan. Do you think we could work as a team? A team? He smiled. Yeah, you know, collecting data and stuff on my past. She looked at him. So, you don't mind. He shrugged. If you've actually had success so far, why stop something when the going's good? Eno smiled. Thanks, Naruto. He just waved her off. We're friends, right? Eno nodded. Right. They smiled at each other as Eno left that mid-morning. The jacket was left behind. If you had told Naruto that his peaceful morning would end up in a batshit crazy evening, he might have taken it in stride. Or laughed in your face. As the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed beast, you really could just never know what sort of luck you would run into during the day. Yet, as things were, Naruto was simply taking a long stroll after mulling over what had happened that morning, only to hear yelling in the distance. He paused confused. That voice is really familiar. If you haven't learned to recognize his almost constant screeching voice as of yet, there is no hope for you, flesh bag. I will have to agree. Naruto growled as he felt a spike of demon chakra spike up in the air. Suddenly Naruto was well aware of who it was yelling, Sora. He ran to where Sora and the person he was arguing with, and also came to recognize some other chakra signatures that more than likely meant trouble for the troublesome monk. He lunged at his temporary teammate, Sora. As he did so, the wall next to Sora and the ninja he was fighting with exploded and several shuriken and kunai flew out. Naruto grabbed Sora and fell to his hands and knees while protecting him. The other boy looked agitated but shaken all at the same time. Naruto, what the? The blonde smiled painfully. Ah, I'm glad you're all right, even if you were a pain in the ass. He felt himself grow suddenly faint. I made it, just in time. Sora growled and shoved him as he yelled. I didn't ask for you to protect me. Naruto stumbled, only to be grabbed carefully from behind. Sora took a step back and looked around himself and lifted his now demonic arm. You're all just the same as them. He ran off and was quickly followed by other ninja. Naruto. The blonde turned to realize it was Yamato who had grabbed him. Are you? The blonde passed out as he felt the warm tea. Rum of Kyuubi's chakra working on healing his wounds, despite the fact he'd yet to have the multiple sources of injury removed. As usual, brat. Back in my cage you appear. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself in front of Kyuubi. He sighed. Frustrated with himself, what the hell is Sora's problem? Why does he reject our help? A translucent Itachi appeared off to the side, yet in between Kyuubi and Naruto. Are you not the same? Naruto blinked. Wah. Itachi stared at him with his usual blank expression and his mouth unmoving. You too reject help from others. Yes, you have come to accept people, and yet, you are incredibly lacking. Your social personality is a complete fraud in many respects. Naruto glared and looked at his reflection in the murky water of his, well, wherever it was Kyuubi was sealed, eye. A puff of unbearingly warm and musty air bore over him in a sigh. I've healed your wounds, brat. I will suggest you go to the Hokage Tower. I sense a great deal of malevolence on the outside, and I believe that abomination is headed that way. Naruto jerked his head up, only to find himself staring at a white ceiling. I'm becoming far too familiar with hospitals. Ow. I hate that smell. Short musing done. The blonde quickly and carefully sat up and redressed himself. He observed the room he was in and was satisfied that no nurses or ninja were there. He smirked and walked over to the window and snuck out, moving quickly towards the Hokage Tower. Sora. Don't do anything stupid. His almost fully healed injuries itched under their wrappings as he made his way up to the top of the Hokage building. Let me make it in time. Single quote. Naruto ran into the Hokage's office. Look out. Tsunade found herself being grabbed by her pseudo-grandson just in time to see a thick tall arrow spear rush past her and lodge itself into the wall. She would have been plunged straight through if she hadn't been grabbed in time. She turned. Naruto. In a flash he moved and held a kunai to parry Sora's attack. Sora. Quote. The young monk growled in frustration. Naruto. Of course you're here to get in my way. Why do you protect her, when she is only causing this country more problems? We only have need for one king. Naruto growled. King this, king that, it's all I ever hear from you. Why are you so focused on killing the old hag? Sora smirked in a way that reminded the blonde of Sasuke in a somewhat chilling way. Because, it's revenge for my father's death. You wouldn't understand that sort of thing, would you, Naruto? That hit a nerve. Naruto shoved Sora roughly. You. Shizune rushed into the room followed by multiple ninja. Tsunade-sama. Sora made a frustrated noise before he jumped out of the window he had initially crashed through and went to make his escape. Sora. Tsunade recovered. Naruto. Follow Sora and don't let him escape. Naruto nodded and went after the monk quickly. The sky crackled as the village was suddenly surrounded by 4 temple-like summons. Phoenix, Dragon, Tiger, and Turtle, all of which took their respective places in their associated direction from north, south, east, and west. Eno looked at the sky, and watched in terror along with many other villagers and fellow ninja the mass genocide that began at that moment, when the lighting started up from the center of the village. Takato. I wanted to get a lot more done this chapter. But due to Pain's attack on the village in this latest chapter, I need to draw this out a little, and I have to figure out how to go about writing a battle. I also have to figure out how to take care of Furito. Arg. In the end, despite the slightly lackluster quality and length of the chapter, I hope you'll find yourselves happy with the next, since it'll give me more time to plan out how to go about writing it. Also, I have an interview tomorrow today in about 11 hours. Wish me luck, because I'm in desperate need of having a job. Please review The Fear, It Burns. Happy Thanksgiving, kids. Anti-Meridian finally came out on iTunes yesterday. Bout time. DX. Thanks to Celtic Reaper, Grumpy Winter, Namikaze 777, Dark Ravi, Mrs. N. Uzumaki, The Final Fighter, Mos ad Interficio, Jor-sama, 62,635,377 nameless. This was not proofread, because the person I asked to do it went offline. Cry. Did you hear the thunderous voice of Dr. King? The ghost of hope still strikes its brilliant lightning. Through the dark our hearts will scream. For a world we've only dreamed. And the past, it will decay. So sing goodbye to yesterday and I believe. And we will burn, the starless night. The truth will ring through depths of twilight. Liberty, our hearts ignite. Let hope still ring through depths of twilight. Brave Saint Saturn, Anti-Meridian, through depths of twilight. Shi-Wa, Tched beside the others as Sora transformed, surrounded by bubbling red as his skin started turning black. It was terrifying and Painful how the red chakra burned their senses and lashed out against their skin. Yet Kiba, Akamaru, and Choji tried their best to hold Sora back or to bring him to his senses. The others too. None of it worked. She cringed as Choji was swatted away like a fly by Sora's the Kyuubi's chakra-covered arm. Ino's knees went weak at the thought that Naruto could actually experience this sort of pain and terror. It was hard to imagine that what was happening to Sora could happen to someone like Naruto. Sora was now in a hunched-over position, his human features almost all gone. He opened his mouth and an unhuman growl left his mouth as a mass of chakra surrounded him. Yamato Taiko yelled, "Get away from it, it's an attack." The blonde jumped out of the way along with everyone else. She felt a blast of heat and pain as the sonic attack finished out. A pause was had as the smoke cleared to show a 30-foot in diameter crater. She sucked in a breath of air as she felt a flutter pass by in a flash of orange. Naruto ran towards Sora, snap out of it. He went to punch the seemingly mindless Sora and got a similar treatment as Kiba had. He slammed into the side of the freshly created crater. Naruto growled and picked himself up. "Sora, you can fight it, I know you can." He ran towards his newest friend and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Come on, man. Remember the fun we had at." A clawed and burning chakra-covered hand grabbed him by the throat and thrust him into the crater's side. He choked and grabbed at the arm before being released, sucking in air and coughing from the dust and lack of oxygen. "Damn it, Sora." Naruto coughed one more tea. Mian wiped his chin before walking towards Sora again. "Please, you have to remember who you are." The blonde boy grabbed the Kyuubi-influenced teen by the shoulders. "You can't let that fur ball win. Don't let it control you." Sora growled. The four-tailed soulless eyes returned his gaze. Naruto held tighter, feeling his hands burn. He gritted his teeth, holding off the pain. "Please, Yamato Ta." ICHOU and the others of the Rookie Nine watched uneasily as everything panned out in front of them. Naruto felt his teeth and nails grow as the Kyuubi's chakra ran over his hands from Sora's body, and started to react to the real thing. He cringed as his skin burned. He growled out, "Sora." Yamato Taiko moved quickly. Hokage Shiki Jijun Jutsu, Kakuen Niden Sushu. He leapt forward as the kanji for sit appeared on his hand. Naruto felt Yamato Taiko slam his hand onto his back and jump away. The blonde was boggled as he felt nothing happen and Yamato was equally confused. The captain jumped back up. "What in the world?" He looked at his hand confused and then back to Naruto and Sora. Naruto cringed as he felt Kyuubi's influence. A dark chuckle reverberated in his mind. "Yes, the anger, the hate. Give in and I shall help you take care of this, imposter." Naruto growled and jumped away from Sora in his three-tailed form. He fought with himself and pulled out a piece of Sora's gauntlet, like hell, fur ball. He plunged the piece of metal into his leg, echoing his actions when he promised himself that he would never run away from a battle again. "I won't let you control me anymore. No, go back into your cage and leave me alone." Kyuubi growled, "You'll regret this, brat." Much to Yamato and the others' amazement, the Kyuubi chakra that had surrounded Naruto dissipated. Naruto gasped, his skin showing random huge burns. He pushed himself into a standing position and walked over to Sora slowly and painfully once more, grabbing him by the shoulders once more. "Sora, you need to remember. Sora." The monks stared at him coldly, separated from them and looked down upon. He hated the feeling. Slowly, the figures of the monks started fading away. "Who am I? What am I?" The boy clung to his knees tighter. The darkness closed in around him. Who is calling me? Ra. The boy looked up towards the ever-shrinking pin of light. "Who is it? What do you want?" Sora, remember." Light burst through as a hand appeared in front of him, a shock of blonde hair blinding him in the sudden light. Naruto smiled at him. "Sora, come on. Don't let it win. Don't you remember?" Sora blinked and took Naruto's hand, harumphing grumpily, "What are you talking about, loser?" Behind Naruto the Rookie Nine slowly appeared with smiles on their faces. "If you go back, you'll understand." Sora gave Naruto an irritated look before. He opened his eyes and blinked, trying to lighten the glare of the early evening light. "Wah." Naruto smiled exhausted. "I'm glad you're back." Sora sniffed. Whatever, looser, black enveloped the young monk once more. Naruto followed shortly thereafter. It had been 2 days since Sora had left on his own to explore the world. Eno felt a sense of loss at not being able to remember where she put Naruto's jacket. It had started to really piss her off, but she was too prideful to actually ask Naruto if he remembered or knew where it was. She figured he'd been through enough at the time to just not remember at all. The three-pronged kunai sat in her lap as she fingered it carefully, its edges still holding a sharpness to them that could still cut skin, as she contemplated. A light chilly wind came from her window and caressed her in an oddly comforting embrace. Suddenly, it wasn't quite so chilly, and she felt something warm envelop her from behind. She sat up straight before turned to see Naruto crouching in her window awkwardly. Hi Ino-chan. He smiled nervously, regretting the fact he wasn't able to make a clean escape. Ino blinked. Naruto-kun. Her expression changed to agitated. You do realize that it's improper to go to a lady's room through her window, right? Naruto sat on tea. He ledged and blushed while rubbing the back of his head. Well, sorta. He wasn't looking at her but the floor. She shifted the warm cloth he'd put on her and put her arms through the all too familiar sleeves. What do you mean by, sorta? Are you serious? Naruto chuckled awkwardly. Well, I mean, I know most things because of Ero Sennin being slapped for doing inappropriate things, and some things I just observed, but Ino stared at him. Oh my gosh, you've never been given a proper lesson in etiquette that could be considered common sense. She smacked her forehead. No wonder Sakura gets so frustrated with you, and no wonder you never notice Hinata. Naruto tilted his eyes and scrunched them all fox-like as he sat beside her on her bed. What do you mean by that? Hinata-chan looks at me funny. I mean, I know she stutters and crap but. Ino whacked him on the head. Idiot, she's liked you for years now. She's just too shy to tell you she likes you. Naruto blinked confused. Well, I like her too but. Ino gave him a look. She likes you like Sakura. He paused before his eyes widened a bit. What? Are you serious? She's so creepy, and she. Ino waved a hand. Yes, say what you want. But it doesn't change the fact the poor girl has liked you since we were in the academy. Naruto paused and thought a bit, recollecting all the weird stuff Hinata did around him. Now it all made sense. So, she passes out because of me too. Ino nodded. Yup. Naruto sighed heavily. Well, that sucks. Ino smirked. Yeah, well, that's just how things happen sometimes. The two sat in silence a moment before Ino spoke up. So, do you need me to teach you how to properly treat a girl? Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Do I treat girls badly? The blonde girl sighed heavily. It was going to be a long day. She knew it. Okay Naruto, let me start with this. 2 hours and one rather scarred 15-year-old boy and embarrassed 15-year-old girl later, and you had one spectacularly awkward atmosphere. Naruto cleared his throat. Well, thanks for clearing all that up for me. Ino huffed. Exhausted. Better now than never. Now get out so I can rest. Naruto grinned and saluted. Yes ma'am. With that the boy jumped out the window with a little more speed than he might have usually left normally. Ino slumped and put the tree-pronged kunai back into its box and then laid back on her bed. She closed her eyes and sighed heavily before she curled onto her side. Naruto, you doofus. She fingered the hem of her sleeve, before a moment of brilliance struck her. Naruto had returned the jacket to her. If we go the distance, we go all out. And if you force us to fight, we go for the knockout. We haven't always been the same men we are today. It took fire to purify us. What didn't burn is what remained. The wedding, I'll sleep when I'm dead, polarity. Sakura laughed at Ino, who glowered at her friend annoyed. She ate her dango grumpily, contemplating her wisdom in telling Sakura about the other day. You actually had to tell him about. Ino glared. As his teammate, that was really your responsibility, forehead. Sakura paused and choked, realizing in a deep blush that her friend was right. Oh my gosh, I'm his teammate, I should have known better then. But I would have thought Jiraiya-sama would have. Or Kakashi-sensei. Ino stared at Sakura blankly. The pink-haired girl cringed. What? You do realize both persons you just mentioned are pervs, right? Sakura blinked. Oh, right, but What about Uruka-sensei, or the academy in general? We learned about it then. More blank staring. What? Eno sighed. You know how well Naruto did in school, right? Sakura nodded. Yeah, so. Pause. Oh, he did bad in the academy, didn't he? I almost forgot. Honestly, I never saw him with a textbook, and I happened to have the odd inkling he might not have been in class that day. I think he was ditching with Shikamaru and Choji. Sakura slapped her forehead. I've been such an idiot. Here I've been reprimanding him by slapping him without even explaining why something was perverted or wrong. Man, no wonder he ever understands why I get so pissed with him. Eno rubbed her cheek. I'm pretty sure his sexy no jutsu was for more than just turning people on too. Sakura paused. What? Are you serious? That technique is so vulgar and it works against perverts, doesn't it? The pink-haired Kunoichi pondered this. Well, yes. But, Eno waved a hand. Well, there you go. I remember while growing up and Naruto was treated pretty badly, though it seems a lot of the adult ninja have come to respect him a lot. Sakura nodded. I've noticed that too, but still. How can you say that technique actually has a use? Eno thought a moment. Well, he is the most surprising ninja, isn't he? If the time comes and it's needed, he'll use it. End of story. So please, if he does actually use it in battle, don't hit him for it. Sakura sighed. Alright, I'll try to make sure Naruto understands my feelings. After I punish him, of course, but I will make sure he gets it. The blonde sighed and nodded her head. Sakura drank some of her tea. So, what gender do you think it'll be? Eno blinked at the switch of conversation. Kurenai. You know, do you think she'll have a boy or a girl? The blonde med nin thought it over. Well, I think it's fine either way, though it'd be kinda nice if she had. It's a boy. Both girls jumped at the voice and turned just in time for Naruto to sit down at their little table with a serious, yet apologetic look on his face. He knew girl talks were a no-no to walk into, but he'd overheard, and, well. Naruto. The blonde boy held up his hands. I won't stay long, I promise. The girls sighed exasperated, but they decided they'd tolerate him. Sakura spoke first. Why do you say that so confidently? Naruto tapped his nose as he sat in a confident position. Just a guess. Eno quirked her eyebrow. Wait a second. Can you actually smell better than a normal person, or even Kiba? Sakura pondered this too. Can you? Naruto tensed up a little. I don't know. It's not like I could honestly estimate that myself. The two girls looked at one another before turning back to Naruto. Eno spoke up first. I've got a plan. Naruto's eyes widened. Wah. He raised his hands in partial surrender. Wait a second. I came here to talk about something kind of important. Eno leant back in her chair. What is it? Naruto fidgeted for a moment. He looked at Sakura for a moment, trying to decide if he really wanted to talk about this in front of her, but ultimately decided he may as well, otherwise, Sakura wouldn't leave him the hell alone about it. I've been having this weird reoccurring dream the past couple of days. It's part of why I went to visit you the other day, but I got sidetracked. Eno blushed lightly. Oh, the sex talk was going to haunt the two of them for a while, right? Go on. Naruto nodded. So, I keep dreaming about this red-haired chick. She isn't always the same age, but I know it's the same girl. Eno's eyes widened and she felt herself pale. Was he serious? That almost sounded like, but, that shouldn't be possible, right? Sakura spoke. So you've been dreaming about some girl. What's so important about that? Naruto sighed. It's hard to explain. She has this patch on her sleeve like I do, and she kind of acts like me, but doesn't. I don't know what to think of it all. She's also wearing a Hittite, but it's blank, and that bothers me. I've tried to figure out what it could mean, but Eno finally caught up to herself, so she appears at different ages. Naruto nodded, contemplating comically. Yeah, like, sometimes she's 12, and then she's 18. But then she's 14, and it's weird. It's like seeing random moments of someone's life, and she has weird conversations with me. Eno leaned forward, interested. Like what? Naruto paused. Well, she asks me how I'm doing sometimes, or she talks about a waterfall. She's talked about the fourth Hokage too, but when she talks about him it's never for very long. Eno looked rubbed an arm and looked at the table. This is just impossible. Single quote. Sakura watched Eno. Do you know something? The blonde kunoichi sighed heavily and tiredly. I think She looked at Naruto. I think you're dreaming about your mother. Sakura and Naruto paused, but the pink-haired girl spoke first. What? Are you serious? That just isn't possible, is it? She looked at her teammate. Have you even met your mother before? Naruto snapped out of a daze and looked at Sakura confused. No. No, I don't know anything about her. I don't even know what she looks like. Let alone her name or anything really. He honestly forget he ever actually had parents at all. She really was rather wild. Nice, but wild. He growled and pushed his Itachi psyche to the back of his head. He didn't need to start growling and grumbling around the two girls, which would only make them freak out. He'd recently learned how animalistic his growl actually was. Eno rubbed a temple. Naruto. What? Quote. Do you think I could maybe read your memories of these dreams you've been having? Just so I can make sure. Naruto paused a moment. Well, she has said some embarrassing things and Eno stared at him a moment blankly. Oh, right, okay, I guess you could, though I don't know if it'll actually work. Eno blinked. Why not? Didn't you try to get into Sora's head when he went berserk? Eno paused and suddenly came to a realization. Wait, so even if you're in control, I might still end up repelled by. Naruto nodded. Maybe, I'm not sure. Eno sighed, defeated. She had no desire to be repelled by that again. I guess I'll leave it for now. If you can, would you please write down as much detail as you can about the dream, if you see her again? Naruto nodded. Sure. There was a pause between the three before Sakura piped up. So Eno, what was this plan you had? Eno paused before she smirked. Well, I was thinking that maybe we could. It was then that Naruto learned the hard way how crafty and evil women could be. Kiba growled as he stood at the starting line, next to Naruto. This is bullshit. Naruto sighed forlornly. I know. Why did I agree to this? Wait, why did you? Hell if I know, Datbeo. Kiba scratched his head. Why would the girls think you have a better sense of smell than me? That's just a damn insult to me, let alone my clan. Naruto laughed nervously. Well, I said something and well, here we are. Kiba gave him a look. Just what did you tell? Okay boys. We're ready. Kiba cringed at Eno's screeched yell. Could you watch the decibels, girl? Eno growled. Shut it, dog face. Now, you have to track down this. She held up a cloth for the two of them to sniff. The two boys looked at each other before sniffing the item. Naruto did this more awkwardly, since he was simply not used to sniffing things. Naruto blinked. Why are we tracking down? Eno back away from the two. All right, you boys ready? Kiba smirked and scuffed. More than ready, this is totally one. The blonde girl rolled her eyes as Naruto nodded. Yeah, sure. Naruto was feeling a little degraded at the moment. He didn't know why, but somehow it felt like this was so below him. That's because this is damn well embarrassing, brat. I can't believe you let it slip that you have a decent nose. Idiot. Naruto sighed. He couldn't even gain refuge in his own mind. Eno held a head up. Ready. Go. Kiba jumped into the nearby foliage and started tracking the designated prey. Naruto, oddly unenthusiastic, huffled along for a moment before Eno whacked him on the head. Hurry up. The boy held a hand up. All right, I'm going. With that, he jumped into the foliage a few feet away from where Kiba did. 5 noted dead ends later, and Naruto found himself in a clearing alone with Tenten, who was cleaning some of her weaponry. He walked over behind her with his hands in his pockets. Hey Tenten. She jumped and looked up behind her to find Naruto. She blinked in surprise. Naruto. You arrived first. He felt himself break out in cold sweat. Really? I got here first. He laughed nervously. Must have been luck. She quirked an eyebrow before Eno and Sakura came into the clearing. They paused as they saw Naruto but no Kiba. Eno walked over. You made it first. Naruto shrugged. I was probably just lucky. Kiba jumped out of the foliage. Goal. The 4 Rookie 9 members looked at Kiba with perplexed looks on their faces. He blushed first from feeling awkward, but then anger and pointed, "You. How the hell do you get here first? You cheated." Naruto felt himself get angry as he growled out, "Kiba." Eno stepped forward and put out her arms. Boys. She looked to Kiba, "How many dead ends did you find?" The dog boy scratched his nose. 4. The blonde Kunoichi looked to Naruto, "You. 5. Sakura's eyes widened as did Tenten's. Eno simply processed all of this in her mind. "Kiba. How many of the dead-end paths did you follow?" 2. Eno turned to Naruto for his answer. I just took note of them and came straight to this path. I could kind of tell which one was the freshest. Though it took a few minutes to tell." Kiba lunged at Naruto. "That's impossible. You." Sakura sucker punched Kiba in the face, making him shut up. "Oh, stop it." Kiba held his nose with tears in his eyes. "Bitch." Sakura glared at him as inner Sakura screamed, "Kick his ass, Shanaru." Single quote. Kiba backed away, not wanting to experience pain so quickly. "I was joking." Sakura shook a fist at him. "You'd better have been." Tenten paused. "So, Naruto has a better nose than Kiba." Eno sighed. "It seems that way." Silence hung over the small group of 5 for a few moments before Kiba spoke up. "It's still bullshit." Naruto simply nodded in exasperation. He really didn't want this sort of info known, and of all people, known by Kiba. "It's 'cause of the fox, right?" Naruto glared at Kiba as his anger suddenly exploded and punched him. "Shut up." Sakura grabbed Naruto before he could move to create more damage. "Naruto." The blonde boy growled deeply in Kiba's erection before slapping the side of his face and holding a hand over his eye. Sakura was close enough to notice his eyes had slits. "Naruto." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath and relaxed himself. "Sorry." Sakura slowly released his arm as her friend tried to recollect himself. Kiba brushed himself off. "You didn't have to hit me for that." Eno growled and huffed out, "And you didn't have to bring up you know what. That was so unnecessary, flea boy." Kiba growled, "I don't have fleas." Eno quirked a brow. "Oh." Kiba blushed and turned. "I don't have to take this crap. See ya." With that Kiba stormed off, leaving a somewhat shaken Naruto behind. The blonde was going to have a hard time sleeping tonight, he just knew it. Sakura looked Naruto over, making sure he was feeling alright. Before she suddenly noticed something. She moved in front of him and pulled some of his hair, causing him to speak up in protest. "Oi." The pink-haired girl cupped his face in her hand, examining him critically. This of course caused Naruto to blush and Eno to feel oddly jealous. "Forehead. What are you? Have you been letting some of your hair grow out, Naruto-kun?" The blonde boy blinked. Well, kind of." Tenten stood beside the younger Kunoichi and joined Sakura in her examination. "You know, now that you say it, he does sort of look like someone, but I can't really explain why he looks familiar. Like someone else I should know." Sakura looked to Tenten and released Naruto's face. "Exactly. I noticed it earlier in the tea shop, but now it's bothering me more and I just can't place it." Eno momentarily freaked. "You guys are probably just imagining it," she laughed nervously. The 2 girls and Naruto looked at her curiously. "Eno." Eno shrugged and smiled. "How about I treat you to some ramen, Naruto?" Naruto jumped. "Yeah, ramen. Here I come." He grabbed her and ran off, leaving behind a baffled Tenten and Sakura. Eno couldn't help but smile, glad that she fully got Naruto off the train of thought of her hair styling. He'd notice sooner or later, but she'd rather keep him in the dark, especially since it was her experiment and inquiry as well.